It's just a little more patience. I need to stop her from helping that old hag before I show my true self.
I was on a flight to Hawaii with my mother when I overheard John's voice from the seat behind us. Holly was also sitting next to him, and I frowned at their alarming conversation. As my mother and I silently listened, we became pale at the horrifying things they were discussing. We decided to punish them. They would regret what they had done. When I gave my mother a knowing look, she agreed with me. We vowed to teach them a lesson with my father's support. My name is Michelle. I run a nursing home, and I'm 38 years old.
Michelle, how about this kind of recreation next time? It involves using milk cartons.
My mother is a clerk at our facility. She has a disability and uses a wheelchair. My mother has had a disability since I was 10. She saved me from being hit by a truck that ran a red light and ended up with a spinal cord injury. Since then, she has been using a wheelchair for nearly 50 years. My father worked hard for my mother, running a car manufacturing company. It grew into a major company with global reach. Its annual revenue has now surpassed $1 million and has reached $10 billion. As a result, my father spends more than half the year overseas, and the three of us only get to be together once every few years. Instead, he sends us monthly packages filled with souvenirs, always with a letter inside. Reading those letters with my mother became one of my joys. Great, let's talk to the staff about it. I think our residents will enjoy this kind of activity. Having mostly lived with my mother, I chose a career in caregiving when I became an adult. I wanted to be there for her if anything happened. However, once I started working, my mother spent more time alone at home. A wheelchair doesn't allow her to go everywhere freely. Most of her friends are still working, so she has limited social interactions. I worried she might be feeling lonely. So, I talked to my father about doing something together with my mother. He suggested running a nursing home.
Your mom used to work in an office. Why don't you become the manager and have her work there? I'll fund it. I'll also reach out to my contacts to gather experienced staff. How about running it as a family?
I immediately agreed to my father's wonderful proposal. I was thrilled to do something with both my mother and father. Office work wouldn't strain her, and her bright personality would warm those around her. Even after her injury, my mother never showed a gloomy face. She was always as bright and warm as the sun. Being by her side kept me from feeling down. I believed she could be someone's hope. So I accepted my father's idea. If our facility could be a light for someone, nothing would make me happier. My father then taught me the ropes of running a business. Using that knowledge, my mother and I managed the facility together. I felt our family bond strengthened through this endeavor. Then, tragedy struck us out of nowhere.
Michelle, would you like your egg fried for breakfast?
This is John. He works as the care manager at our facility and is my husband. In our 5th year of running the facility, he joined as a care manager. He works hard, is well liked by the residents, and has a bright personality, making him very popular at the facility. People of all ages and genders had a good impression of him. Dawn and I got married. Now, the three of us live together with his daughter, Holly, from a previous marriage. Holly also works at our facility, doing the same office job as my mother. She works under my mother. A fried egg is fine. Thank you, as always. Even though you have work, you still help with the housework.
What are you talking about? Michelle is busier than I am. So it's only natural that we support each other as a couple.
Exactly. Thanks to Michelle, Dad has started helping with the housework too, which is a huge relief for me. He didn't even know how to use the washing machine before.
Holly was scolded for saying too much. Seeing their comedic exchange made me smile. Since marrying John, I moved out of the house, and my mother lives in the residential part of the facility. My father had it built considering my mother's commute. Thanks to that, even after I moved out, my mother wasn't completely alone. There were always people nearby in case of an emergency, providing a secure environment. At least that's what I thought. But I didn't realize it. The mistreatment my mother was receiving from John and Holly.
Hey, Michelle, would you like to go on a trip with me next time?
What's with this sudden suggestion? During my work break, I happened to have lunch with my mother. It had been a while since we had a relaxed conversation like this, but something seemed off. I hadn't noticed since we were always together, but my mother looked thinner. It could be because it was summer, but the facility is air-conditioned 24/7, and her home is also fully equipped with the heating and cooling. It didn't look like a healthy weight loss. Her expression was dark, and she seemed devoid of energy. I listened to my mother's words, feeling concerned.
I want to visit your father.
To see Dad? Oh, right, it's your anniversary next month. I reflexively asked, surprised by the suddenness. Then I quickly remembered their anniversary next month and solved it in my head. Thinking that was the reason, I quickly continued the conversation, but my mother had a complicated expression, like she had swallowed something bitter.
Yes, your father will send me a plane ticket to meet. So, I need some time off.
My mother forced a smile to hide her expression. That was the first time I felt something was off with my mother. She seemed scared of something, and I wanted to ask, but she shook her head. Was it not the right place to talk? There were other staff in the break room, and my mother seemed to be concerned about them.
But my condition, I want you to accompany me, Michelle.
She interrupted me as if to prevent me from speaking. Her abruptness surprised me, causing me to stutter. Seeing my reaction, my mother looked even more anxious, piling on the pressure.
Is that okay?
I quickly smiled and nodded in agreement. Of course it's okay. It's scary to be alone, right? So until Dad gets there, I'll be your escort. It's a special date, so you two need some time alone, don't you think?
A date. That sounds a little embarrassing.
My mother laughed elegantly, blushing slightly. Maybe I was imagining things. Seeing her like that, I decided not to pry further. A little later, my father sent us 2 plane tickets. I had already told John and Holly that I was going to visit my father, but since then, I've been traveling all over the US for inspections and meetings at new facilities. I haven't had proper time with my family lately. Maybe I'll invite them out for a meal when I get back. With that carefree thought, I headed to the airport. The tickets my father sent were for Hawaii. Even though I told John and Holly that I was going to Hawaii, I figured I could tell them all about it when I got back. With that in mind, I headed to Hawaii without telling them my destination. On the plane to Hawaii, my mother and I took our assigned seats, and I felt excited as I looked out the window. My mother, too, seemed bright and cheerful about the trip. I'm glad. Mom looks healthy. Feeling relieved to see her happy, I spoke to her. It's been a while since you last saw Dad and went to Hawaii. You're probably a little excited, aren't you?
Maybe. You're right. I feel like I'm escaping from that place.
What? I was about to ask her what she meant by that when I suddenly heard familiar voices from the back seats.
How long do I have to keep pretending? I'm getting tired of acting like the good one.
It's just a little more patience. I need to stop her from helping that old hag and make her obsessed with me before we show our true selves. Otherwise, if we show our true colors now, I'll just end up divorced. That would make the marriage pointless.
I heard Holly and John's voices from the seat behind us. Why are they on this plane? As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't believe the coincidence.
This way is really roundabout, you know? But I guess we have no choice. It's for the money.
That's right, Holly. Let's forget about that stress today and enjoy our trip to Hawaii.
Don't act like you're paying for this trip just because you won it in the community raffle.
Hearing their conversation, I couldn't help but be amazed at the coincidence. If they're also going to Hawaii, I could spend time with them while my parents are on their date. It'd be a win-win situation where I could pass the time and they could have a good time. With that optimistic thought, I turned around to greet them when I heard terrifying words from their mouths.
Seriously, who spends money on their parents instead of their daughters or husbands? Parents won't be around for long, so you should spend money on your kids who have a future. It's infuriating to waste money on someone who's going to die soon. Just seeing that old hag's face makes me irritated.
Come on, don't say that. I've already told the old hag that Michelle should stop supporting her, or else Holly and I will quit the facility, and I'll divorce Michelle.
Hearing their tone, which I'd never heard before, I was left speechless. Is the conversation I'm hearing really between Holly and John? As I stood there in shock at their unbelievable conversation, they continued speaking.
I even threatened her, saying it was all her fault, so she should stop Michelle soon. She wouldn't want Michelle to be unhappy because of her, right? She'll accept my threats.
Dad, you're so bad. It's all just to make Mom spend all her money on us, isn't it? After we get all the money we can from her, you'll just throw her away like you did with the last old hag, right?
Exactly.
I couldn't hide my shock at the voices and the conversation I was hearing. John had told me he was dumped by his ex-wife, but if this conversation was true, he was the one who dumped her, and Holly found it amusing. I was so angry at the terrible content and the lies that I was about to turn around and confront them. But at that moment, my mother grabbed my arm, her face pale, and shook her head.
Please, Michelle, stay calm. Don't say anything.
Seeing my mother desperately pleading with me, I stopped moving. It wasn't motion sickness, her face had turned pale after recognizing John and Holly. I knew my mother didn't get motion sickness, and she had been fine until hearing their conversation. Most importantly, there were my mother's earlier cryptic words.
I'm escaping from that place.
Did those words relate to John and Holly? As this thought crossed my mind, my mother let go of my hand and took out her phone. She seemed to be sending a message to someone. After a moment, she looked at me and gestured for me to look at my phone. I opened my phone as she instructed and checked the screen. There was a new message notification from my mother.
Let's communicate through this messaging app from now on.
Following her lead, I continued the conversation with my mother via the app. What is going on? The conversation between John and Holly. It's about you and me, right? I sent the message and watched my mother's face as she received it. She trembled with fear, and noticing my gaze, she looked at me and nodded repeatedly.
I never told you, but I've been harassed since those two joined the facility.
I couldn't close my mouth in shock. The messages continued, and the content was even more shocking.
At first, they criticized my work. They said that just because I have a disability, only doing data entry work and not other tasks was unacceptable.
A newcomer criticizing a senior like that was unimaginable. Even though it was hard to believe, the following messages revealed even more shocking truths.
They demanded higher salaries, saying that since I had it easy, my salary should be lower. Since Holly is technically my granddaughter, she said if my salary couldn't be lowered, I should spend more on her. They kept demanding money from me.
I couldn't process it all. We had indeed become family, but work was work. I couldn't tolerate them treating my mother so horribly by mixing personal and professional matters.
I couldn't bring myself to do anything for them, so I refused. Then they started threatening me together. They said I should stop receiving support from you, Michelle. If I didn't, they'd leave you.
The sheer nastiness and the content made me grip my phone tightly. The worst part was the slander about my mother's condition. The facts written there were so vile that I felt an urge to confront the two behind me right away. Noticing my reaction, my mother sent another message, driving the point home.
The real reason for this trip was to tell you about this. I've already discussed it with your father.
That's when it hit me. If I acted now, it would render my mother's efforts useless.
I always believed I could endure anything as long as you were happy. But those two are a curse that will only bring you misery. Your father also said there's no need to hold back anymore.
As I scrolled down, I saw a message from my father, detailing our next steps and the waiting location. Reading it brought a smile to my face. With this, we can surely make those two see hell.
It means you'll have to play a tough role too. Will you still help?
Of course, after what they've done to you, there's no way they're getting away with it. Enjoy your flight while you can. When you land, hell begins. I silently whispered these thoughts to the two laughing crudely behind us. Soon after, the plane landed at the airport. Keeping our heads down to avoid detection, my mother and I waited until they left the plane before we followed. Once outside the airport, a car my father had arranged was waiting, and we quickly got in.
Did you explain everything to Michelle?
Yes. I sent it all while we were on the plane.
I'm sorry, Dad. I was right there with Mom, and I didn't even notice. Usually gentle and kind, my father's face was stern when we reunited after so long.
It's not your fault. They were sneaky. It's no wonder you didn't realize.
He gently patted my head as I apologized. Then he instructed the driver to follow the car ahead.
I know where those two are headed. Once we arrive, we'll start. Michelle, I need you to sign this.
Got it. I signed the document my father handed me. Eventually, the car stopped at a hotel. John and Holly entered the hotel to check in. We followed them inside, and I reached out to tap John on the shoulder from behind as they were at the reception desk.
Michelle,
Why are you two here?
They were just in the middle of checking in when I silently tapped John on the shoulder. He turned around suspiciously, followed by Holly. Seeing me, my mother, and my father in front of them, they stepped back in surprise and confusion. We're here on a trip too, right, Mom?
Yes.
I responded with a broad smile to put them at ease. Relieved, they both sighed and spoke.
oh, you scared me. Now that you mention it, you did say you were going trip. I can't believe we're staying at the same hotel.
What? Really? That's such a coincidence. We won this trip to Hawaii in the community raffle.
There's no way we're staying at the same hotel. We're at a much better place. And what's with that creepy smile? Don't direct it at us, it's gross. I responded in a cold tone, completely different from before. The two were stunned into silence. Then my mother spoke to them.
We need to talk to you too.
She nodded at the woman at the reception desk, who promptly led us to a meeting room.
Wait, what's going on? Why does everyone look so serious?
Holly, sensing something was wrong, looked at us with concern. John, too, was visibly nervous, a cold sweat forming on his forehead. I gave them a chilling smile and brought up their conversation from the plane. You two had quite an interesting conversation on the plane. Something about stopping the support, right? I stretched my words out mockingly, and their faces turned pale. Of course. They never expected anyone to have overheard their conversation.
No way.
Were you both on that plane too?
Can you stop being so familiar? It's disgusting and uncomfortable now. Though I was smiling, my voice was filled with anger, making Holly shrink back in fear. We were sitting right in front of you. You didn't notice, did you? Well, of course not. You were too busy making a scene and having a stupid conversation. No wonder you didn't notice. I was wondering who was making such a crude and idiotic conversation. It was laughable. As I connected my words with mocking tones, stirring up their emotions, it seemed my way of speaking had struck a nerve. John shot me a glare with a grim expression.
What's with that attitude? Are you mocking us?
Does it look like I'm not? Maybe you should get your eyes checked because you clearly can't see straight. I continued to mock them while my parents silently watched. Usually, they would have stopped me. But this was all part of the plan. My task was to provoke John and Holly, and it worked. Falling right into our trap, John and Holly began to raise their voices.
Stop messing around. What do you want from us?
Yeah. Why did you bring us here? Let us go already.
If anyone's messing around, it's you two. Mocking my mother, threatening her, and trying to extort money. Did you think you could get away with it? We know everything. I shouted back, matching their volume, making them jump in fear. You've done terrible things to my mother, telling her to stop receiving support, right? Saying I should spend money on kids with a future instead of an old woman with little time left. Don't make me laugh. Who would give money to gold diggers like you? Realizing they were exposed, Holly tried to act superior. Beside her, John twisted his face in frustration and glared at my mother for ratting them out. Don't think divorce is the end of it. You two are about to experience a hell you can't even begin to regret. As soon as they heard the word divorce, John and Holly burst into laughter.
Divorce. Hey, who do you think is going to sign those papers? Just because we supposedly harassed that old hag? Come on, you have no proof.
Exactly. If you want a divorce, you'd need to show proof that we harassed or threatened her.
They took my bait, showing their true colors. Holly came back at me, as if poking at my sore spots, with a mocking smile as she leaned in close to my face.
If you want a divorce from Dad, you need our consent. There's no way we're agreeing to that.
That's true, but the fact remains that you harassed my mother. I bet we could find proof by checking the workplace security cameras.
Impossible. We made sure to do it where no cameras could see. We're not that stupid.
So, you're saying you won't stop harassing my mother? Holly boasted proudly about their tactics. They seemed to misunderstand their superiority, wearing smug smiles and provocatively staring at us. When I asked about the harassment, Holly made a proposal.
If you want us to stop, then cut off the support to that hag and transfer $500 to us every month.
Right. Lower her salary, and you should have enough to cover it.
And if we don't comply,
We'll keep harassing her. As long as we get the money, we don't care. If you don't comply, I can't guarantee what will happen to that hag.
John and Holly grinned smugly. I let out a big sigh. I couldn't believe everything was going so perfectly according to plan. It was almost too good to be true. Amazed at how easily John and Holly fell into our trap, I pointed behind them. Thanks to your recent comments, we now have proof that you harassed my mother.
Huh?
What?
Confused, they looked in the direction I pointed. There, they saw something glinting. As they squinted and realized what it was, their faces turned pale. This room's security camera is special. It's not on the ceiling but hidden in that ornament, and it records audio too.
What?
This hotel had once been robbed, and all the cameras had been destroyed. Fortunately, the robbery was thwarted, but hidden cameras were installed everywhere afterward. This room was no exception. The camera was hidden in the eyes of a wooden tiger statue with a microphone in its mouth. You thought the cameras didn't record audio, so you talked freely. But now we have definitive proof of your harassment.
Disgusting. This is so unfair.
That's right. This is illegal filming. We'll sue you.
Realizing they had been completely trapped, John and Holly yelled at me, knowing they were at a disadvantage. Matching their intensity, I spoke with such force that they trembled in fear. Try it if you can. I'll crush you completely. We're always ready to fight you.
Damn it.
My confident demeanor must have intimidated them. John turned pale, glaring at me with frustration. Beside him, Holly bit her thumbnail, desperately trying to think of a way out. Realizing the lawyer threat wouldn't work, she shifted to accepting the divorce with conditions.
If you're getting divorced, you better give us our share of the assets. I know that assets are split evenly in a divorce.
Giving up on trying to win me over, she now demanded property division. But I had no intention of giving them a penny. That's when my father stepped in.
Sorry, but that's not happening.
What?
Stay out of this, old fart. This is a family matter.
I can't do that. My wife has been mistreated, and my daughter has been dragged into this. No father would stay silent.
Hearing their outrageous statements to my father, my mother and I were speechless. They had angered the one person they shouldn't have.
You two won the raffle for this hotel stay at the community festival, right?
So what?
The thing is, the person who organized that festival is an acquaintance of mine. I had him rig the raffle to lure you here.
What? Wait a minute. What are you talking about?
They were confused by my father's sudden confession. That was to be expected. It would be hard for anyone to grasp what he had done. My father began to explain clearly to the bewildered pair.
We knew you'd participate in the raffle. I showed my friend your photos and had him rig it so you'd win the trip to Hawaii.
Wait, hold on. It was pure coincidence that we entered that raffle.
Yeah, we might not have participated at all. Do you expect us to believe this nonsense?
There was no way you'd miss it because your favorites were performing at that festival.
The moment they heard that, they turned to me with shocked expressions. I responded with a smirk and a peace sign.
Michelle told us about your favorite celebrities. We made sure to invite those idols and models to the festival. We figured you'd stay for the raffle if you were there to see them. And John, you're known for loving free stuff. It was more likely you'd enter than not.
Completely falling into my father's trap. John realized how deeply he was ensnared and slumped in despair. But Holly was different. She tried to bolt for the door. But my father had anticipated that too. Waiting outside were his formidable bodyguards.
What is this?
Give it up. You think we'd let you escape? We're not sending you back home either.
What do you mean?
I approached Holly with a sinister smile, lifted her chin, and made her look at me. You'll pay for hurting my mother with your labor.
What are you going to do to us?
You two will work as janitors at this hotel for the rest of your lives.
What?
Holly shouted in shock. John, too, looked up in surprise, but quickly realized from my expression that I wasn't joking. My father bought this hotel last month. It's known for its affordability and delicious food, but it needs more staff since the rebranding. We were looking for some help.
Are you kidding me? Who'd work in a place like this? Besides, you can't keep us here forever. We won't do that. Are you stupid?
Her youthful bravado was evident, but she'd soon regret her words.
You guys' intentions don't matter.
Angered by her disrespect, my father stood up, exuding an overwhelming presence that made Holly flinch.
I'm quite well connected here. I have a lot of friends.
What are you trying to say?
The manager of our hotel is a friend of mine who's from LA. He grew up in Skid Row.
Even Holly knew what that meant. The moment she heard Skid Row, her face turned pale.
He's going back to his hometown for about a week starting tomorrow, and he'll be taking you two with him. You won't be coming back.
Since they were getting ready for a trip, they could be taken to LA without any issues. Realizing this, Holly broke down in tears, begging for forgiveness.
I'm sorry. I'll never act like that again. I'll do anything you say. Please, just don't send us there.
I'll do anything too. I apologize for everything. Please, let us go back home.
Both Holly and John started crying and pleading with us. But we weren't about to listen to them, and I pushed them into despair. Apologizing won't help. You'll work here until you wish for hell instead. Don't even think about running away, because if you do, you'll just be transferred from Hawaii to somewhere even worse.
No.
Please, Michelle, forgive us.
They cried, begging for mercy. But I ignored them and instructed my father's bodyguards to take them away. The guards carried them off, and they never returned home. Thanks to my father, my mother and I succeeded in getting a revenge on John and Holly. After that, my father had John sign the divorce papers I wrote on the plane.
I'll film him signing it and then mail it back.
I was impressed by my father's thoroughness. He also demanded compensation from them for the torment they inflicted on my mother. Having experienced my father's power firsthand, they didn't dare refuse. Since then, John and Holly have been working as janitors at my father's hotel. Their salaries are sent to my mother as compensation, and they live in a shared house with other employees. Knowing their past actions, the other employees treat them like slaves, making them work from dawn till dusk. Afterward, my parents enjoyed a long-awaited date. I had a wonderful time in Hawaii, and we all had a lovely family dinner.
I'm so lucky to have a family like this.
Seeing my mother relieved, I smiled too. I'm the lucky one, Mom.
What?
Thank you for always protecting me. From now on, Dad and I will protect you. So, talk to us about anything that bothers you. You and Dad mean the world to me. As I held my mother's hand, she shed happy tears, and my father gently stroked her hair. Watching them, I felt truly fortunate to be their child. As I watched my mother being supported by my father, I couldn't help but feel grateful for how things had turned out.
I know we were finally going on a trip after so long, but I'm really sorry. An emergency came up at work, so we have to cancel. I'll make it up to you later, I promise.
Today was the day we had reservations at a fancy hotel for our couple's getaway. Shaken by the call from Kevin, I asked him why. But he was clearly acting strange, dodging the conversation. Suspecting something was wrong, I immediately called our daughter, Nancy.
It figures. All right, I'll handle things from here. Mom, you stay put at home. I'll prepare and head over right away.
Okay, I'll be waiting. I had always felt something off about Kevin's actions. Even before he became a CEO, when he was younger, there was something peculiar about him. It's hard to shake the feeling of mistrust, but of course, as a CEO, it's natural for him to be at the company. I called Kevin again, urging him to come home soon. When Kevin returned home in the morning, he apologized loudly as soon as he entered the doorway.
I'm sorry.
What a frustrating person. Okay, look behind you for a second. When Kevin turned around, his face went pale the moment he saw me and the person next to me. My name is Laura, and I'm a 45-year-old stay-at-home mom. Up until 2 years ago, I lived with my husband, Kevin, and our daughter, Nancy, but recently, Nancy got married. As a working adult, Nancy and her husband, George, started living together, and now it's just Kevin and me at home. Kevin has been the CEO of a well-known company since his early 30s, which allowed us to live comfortably when Nancy was young. We often went on trips as a family of 3. Nancy also looked forward to traveling, and she closely monitored whether Kevin had properly made the hotel reservations. Kevin always took care of booking the hotels and paying for everything. Even when I offered to pay, he insisted on handling it. We were a couple who expressed gratitude to each other, and to outsiders, we must have seemed very close. We never forgot to show our appreciation, and I was diligent about managing our finances. However, this story is from when Nancy was still young. As Nancy entered middle school, Kevin's behavior began to change gradually. When I picked up Nancy from school and returned home, Kevin, who was usually there, was absent. I tried calling him several times, but he never answered. Sometimes he would come home and just fall asleep on the couch while messing with his smartphone. And that wasn't all. Even though he used to contribute financially to the household, he stopped completely. When Nancy wanted to have a wedding ceremony, Kevin was visibly displeased and dismissive. When she mentioned wanting children, he outright rejected the idea, assuming it would only lead to future hardships. As her parents, we should have wanted to support her, but Kevin refused to listen to Nancy's views and kept imposing his own.
You're young. You should be the ones to put up the money yourselves.
What kind of way is that to talk? It's unfair to Nancy. Just because they are young doesn't mean they can easily afford it. I argued this because I care about Nancy. But Kevin just scoffed and said,
Isn't it the truth? After all the hard work we've put into raising her, she should be supporting us now.
Does that mean we shouldn't support her, though? Even as I got angry, Kevin's views didn't change. Why is he always so negative? The old Kevin would never have said such things. In fact, he used to be very supportive, especially when Nancy was born. When Nancy was just a baby, he used to say that parenting should come before work. It might have been because many people around us were stay-at-home moms, but Kevin was very kind not just to me but also to Nancy. Even when work was hectic, Kevin always made sure to come home, and I remember how he found solace just by looking at Nancy's sleeping face. He used to prioritize loving her. What changed him so much? Thinking about it only gives me a headache, so I took up exercising as a hobby to build up my strength. Of course, Nancy was shocked by Kevin's rejection. Meanwhile, Kevin, who had been the one to reject her, was increasingly absent from home. At that time, I received a call from Nancy.
Sorry, Mom. I don't want Dad to know, but I'm pregnant. I can't come home anymore, so I thought I'd tell you in advance.
I see. I'm relieved. I thought you had given up because of what Dad said.
No way. I've always said I wanted children. I'll make sure to raise them well.
Yeah, I see. Do your best, Nancy, but don't overdo it, okay? You should rely on others sometimes.
Got it.
Nancy seemed happy as she replied. Thinking that I must not tell Kevin about this conversation, I decided that the best thing to do when he returned home was to act as usual and say nothing. Months have passed since Kevin stopped coming home. I received a message from Nancy with a photo. It was a report that her child had been born. The screen showed a cute child who looked just like Nancy. How cute! I'm really glad that the mother and child are safe. As I was crying, Kevin appeared out of nowhere and snatched my smartphone with a threatening tone.
She went and had a kid.
How can you say such a horrible thing? That's your own daughter. It's your first grandchild. Don't you think she's cute? Give me back my smartphone.
No way. I thought you and Nancy were up to something, but it seems I was right. What's next? A wedding? I won't approve it.
Kevin suddenly returned home and began to deny even Nancy's private life. I couldn't understand why he was so fixated, and I argued back. There are no parents who don't support their own daughter. Maybe you should think about your own role.
And when are you planning to start working? You've been a stay-at-home mom forever. I don't want to hear this from someone who hasn't made a move even after her daughter has grown up.
Ouch, that hits hard. The reason I've been a stay-at-home mom without working is that I was raising Nancy. While I acknowledge there is some truth to his point, I still intend to keep supporting Nancy. On the other hand, Kevin always complains without ever really being home. Even when he was at home, he would leave for work again as soon as possible. I, too, couldn't stand him because of this fact. Being in my 40s makes finding a job not so easy. When I discussed this with Nancy, she mentioned that upskilling is a popular term in the current job market. So, I decided to upskill myself to be able to work. With the help of online courses, I finally acquired some new skills. With Nancy's support, I was able to start working from home after a long hiatus. Seeing this, Kevin looked puzzled. He seemed shocked, probably because he thought I was still just a stay-at-home mom. I had never seen that expression on his face before, and I couldn't help but laugh. This is fine, right?
Right. I never thought I'd see the day you start working. That's why I'm surprised.
Despite his criticism about me not working, he still spoke in a condescending tone when I finally started working. Why does he only know how to talk down to me? Just as I was about to retort, Kevin made a suggestion.
Now that you're working, we can stay at fancy hotels, right?
What's he talking about now? Fancy hotels? Oh, the ones we talked about wanting to visit together back then. It was back when Kevin and I were newlyweds, not long after we started living together. At that time, traveling was my hobby. I had stayed at every local hotel and was being a bit demanding about wanting to go somewhere else. That's when I found out I was pregnant with Nancy and decided to prioritize parenting. Since then, there haven't been any trips for the three of us together. My days were filled with housework. Kevin was the CEO of a well-known company, and Nancy went to school. I had forgotten for a while, but I finally remembered. Truth be told, I still want to travel. I've been wanting to go on a trip for just the two of us for some time, so I was honestly very happy when he brought it up. But seeing how Kevin has been acting recently, I wonder if it was a good idea to go together after all. I thought this could be a chance to spend some quality time as a couple, but our relationship was still strained. I decided to tentatively make a suggestion to Kevin. Just to be safe, before any whims come up, I wanted to leave the decision on whether we go on a trip to Kevin. Shall we go together?
Yeah, don't you think it'd be nice for us to spend some time together as a couple after so long?
But what about the money? I can't get it ready right away.
Don't worry, I'll cover it.
That's it. Kevin is the CEO of a well-known company. I got so caught up in his poo attitude towards Nancy, but he still remembered about our previous plan to go on a trip as a couple. Excited, I decided to start preparing a week before the reservation date. It seemed there was no need to worry about money, but just to be safe, I decided to bring the money I had earned from working from home. However, the day before we were supposed to leave for the fancy hotel, Kevin suddenly called.
I know we were finally going on a trip after so long, but I'm really sorry. An emergency came up at work, so we have to cancel. I'll make it up to you later, I promise.
I was looking forward to it, but then Kevin canceled on the day of the reservation. Frustrated, I violently pulled out the clothes from the neatly packed carry-on bag, and tears overflowed. Does he think it's okay to blame everything on work? Even if I asked Kevin for a reason why we can't go, he always dodges the question and doesn't consult with me. I was really looking forward to it. I just don't get that man. I muttered quietly and then cried out loud. After a while, I managed to calm my emotions. Enough. I don't just want a marriage in name. I want a real partnership. I'm going to stop hoping and expecting us to be a cooperative couple. I called Nancy's cell phone. Then, I heard George's voice over the phone. Nancy and George were talking about something, but I couldn't make out what it was. However, Nancy seemed a bit frantic, and George was calm as they sounded like they were arguing. It must be about that issue. It seems the results of the task I had asked both Nancy and George to handle had come out. This matter apparently required Kevin and me to be together, so they decided to come over to our house on short notice. Before Nancy and George arrived, I tried to contact Kevin on his cell phone. But as expected, it went straight to voicemail. Hearing the familiar voicemail greeting, I couldn't help but feel irritated. After several redials, I finally got through to Kevin. It was Sunday. Even though he left early in the morning and it was already evening, Kevin hasn't returned home yet. Common reasons for divorce include debt or affairs. Despite my bad feeling, I asked Kevin, "Nancy is coming over today. Please come home early. There's something important we need to discuss."
Important discussion? Wait, I already told you I had to cancel our trip because of an emergency at work, didn't I?
Kevin seemed almost smugly amused. It's hard to believe a company with a full weekend off would be working on a Sunday. Additionally, it's known as a white company, which implies ethical business practices. They wouldn't be doing something so off base. But if we only listen to Kevin's side, even the white company claim could be a lie. If I could make a case, Kevin, as the president, would have to comply. I decided to discuss the information George had uncovered about Kevin. "I'm listening, but the whole story sounds off. Actually, you have a mountain of debt, don't you?"
What? Well, on what basis are you saying that? I don't understand.
From your reaction, it seems to be true. So, if you don't come home, I'll throw out all your belongings. I'm serious. I could hear my voice trembling. Honestly, I didn't want to believe the details Nancy and George had dug up. Yet, looking at Kevin's recent behaviors, the mention of debt now made sense. It's natural for a wife not to want to believe such things.
Please, don't throw away my things. I'm begging you.
No, if you're not going to face this properly, I'm considering divorce.
Wait, okay. I'll apologize. Just give me some time.
Apologies aren't enough. I'll believe it when I see action. I'll be waiting at home. After hanging up the phone, I could feel my body shaking terribly. Always being on the receiving end of harsh words or having to keep my cool has always been hard. Exhausted, I ended up sitting down at the front door. Kevin's company operates with full weekends off. Kevin, now the president, continues to improve its performance, so there shouldn't be any financial issues, but something must have changed along the way. Likewise, something must have changed between us as a couple, too. I didn't choose to live with Kevin just to feel this way. Just then, Nancy arrived at the house. Seeing me sitting dejected at the front door, she looked worried and leaned in.
Mom, are you okay? George is here too. He's more capable than me, so let's get everything out in the open when Dad arrives.
Yo, sorry for showing you this pathetic side of me.
Don't worry about it, it's okay. And today, I really wanted to eat your cooking. Do you think you're up to it now? Should I help?
Nancy, now a mother herself, offered to take over the household chores for me. Ah, that's right. I was also desperate to live up to being a mother. I might have been too focused on my own struggles to see anything else, but it was all to protect my child. I thought Kevin would be home late at night or by morning, so we prioritized cooking dinner together for now. While preparing dinner with Nancy, I noticed that George hadn't shown up yet. Where's George?
George said he'd wait outside because of the situation with Dad. Plus, we can't just leave our child alone. So after dropping our child off at George's parents', he's waiting in the car.
Right, it's dangerous to leave a child alone.
Yeah, and we don't want to expose our child to our parents' arguments, right? George and I just want to live peacefully.
As I looked up startled, Nancy gave me a reassuring smile. Parents' arguments. Maybe Nancy has been enduring her share of struggles too. I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Then, I got a notification on my smartphone from Kevin, which was in my pocket. The message from Kevin said he would be home tomorrow morning.
I'll contact George. We need to prepare too.
I'll get ready as well. How about we all have a light dinner before that?
That sounds good.
Until Kevin arrived, Nancy, George, and I decided to get together and have dinner. George entered looking apologetic and apologized for the delay in making the formal marriage greeting. He's kind not to worry about the formalities. I felt warmed by his gesture. Seeing the dishes on the table, George looked surprised. When I asked him about it, he smiled happily and said he was amazed by how authentic the cooking was.
Moreover, it's sad that Kevin doesn't come home to eat such delicious food.
I'm used to it, really. As long as Nancy and you occasionally come to visit, that's enough for me.
Is that so? That's good to hear. I feel like I can fully confront Kevin now.
That's good. There's much I've turned a blind eye to. I'll count on both of you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Leave it to us.
They looked at each other and burst out laughing. They get along so well. Truthfully, I'm jealous of their good relationship. Back to the issue at hand, the main thing for us to clarify then was Kevin's true intentions. The mention of debt had shaken him, confirming my intuition was right. Also, the information the two had investigated was correct. That fact alone clung to my mind and saddened me. After dinner and clearing up, we held a strategy meeting for tomorrow morning. We planned to make it as smooth as possible, ensuring Kevin couldn't dodge the issues. I despise how Kevin seems to please others only to remain in a safe zone himself. After the meeting, we decided to sleep in the same room. In the morning, I received a message from Kevin saying, "I'll be there soon." I relayed the message to the others, and we took our planned positions. While I didn't want to think this would be the end, the fact was that we have been struggling up until this point. Even if it were to come to divorce, I have no regrets about ending this marriage relationship. Still, I occasionally think that maybe I could have handled things better. Maybe if I had dealt with this earlier, we might not have had to struggle so much. If it weren't for Nancy and George's comforting presence, I probably wouldn't have been able to make this decision. As a parent and as an individual, I feel pathetic. Then, just then, Kevin burst into the house. He started apologizing as soon as he entered the front door. The door remained wide open, and he was shouting so loudly that the neighbors could probably hear.
I'm sorry, Laura. I'll book a fancy hotel again, and we'll go together.
This must have been his way of thinking. Unfortunately, his words didn't touch my heart at all. Feeling out of place, as if his voice reached no one, Kevin repeatedly called my name while searching the house. But I wasn't there, because I was in the car that Nancy and George were using.
Now's the time, Mom.
That's right, I'll do my best.
Yeah, go for it.
With Nancy's words of encouragement, I got out of the car. Kevin appeared at the front door, about to re-enter the house. "Hey, wait." When I called out to him, he turned around with a startled yelp. I took a deep breath before speaking again. "I need to talk to you, Kevin."
Talk. Can't we just reschedule the trip sometime?
"Well, okay, look behind you for a second."
Turn around.
Kevin turned towards me. Then he saw Nancy and George standing behind me. However, when Kevin saw George, he looked terribly frightened.
You are.
Long time no see, Kevin. I'm married to Nancy, you know. Did you forget that?
No, I know.
Where did all his bluster go? George greeted him with a smile and offered his hand for a handshake. But Kevin brushed the hand away and shouted in anger.
What happened to my request? You said I'd know the results soon, and then nothing.
Oh, is that so? You've been sneaking around, trying to strike it rich from morning till night.
What are you talking about? I haven't heard anything about that.
Of course, we have proof. Laura was worried about you, but as Nancy said, you're just a man chasing quick riches.
Then George pulled out several credit cards he had somehow confiscated. Given Kevin's pursuits of quick riches, he ended up taking loans whose amounts were too high to be repayable.
Let's end this. I don't think you can fix anything now. You should apologize to Laura first, like a man should.
Kevin looked like it was the end of the world and muttered something under his breath. Then he apologized in a barely audible whisper. Thanks to George, a skilled attorney, Kevin's debts were uncovered. I conveyed to George that there was no point in continuing to live together any longer.
That's right.
Then George proceeded with the arrangements. The debts on Kevin's credit cards had to be reduced. However, I thought it was important for him to take responsibility, so I informed him that I would not cooperate.
Should we proceed with the divorce then?
Yes, please.
Understood. I will review the divorce papers and then discuss them again with Kevin as your representative, if that's okay with you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Though I had given my consent as a representative, George mentioned that he would also obtain consent from the person concerned later on. After that, Kevin started doing cleaning jobs. He said he was paying the price for having freely spent money as a CEO. He has some nerve saying that, given it's all his own doing. We also decided to have one last discussion before submitting our divorce papers.
I don't want to split up.
Kevin kept throwing tantrums right to the end. But it was time for him to stop the futile resistance. I believe it's absolutely wrong for anyone to ever cause trouble for others. And it's better to speak up, rather than keeping secrets until they inevitably spill out. Money is so convenient that it can also bring one's life crashing down. After that, Kevin and I got divorced. I started living alone, something I had long wished for, but it was lonely after always living with someone. When Nancy heard this, she came to me.
Mom, why don't we live together?
Are you sure?
Of course.
Nancy happily agreed. Nancy and George greeted me, along with their little daughter, who was born when I was in the midst of all the legal procedures. Her tiny hand gripped my finger tightly. Oh, how adorable she is, so precious. Her big, innocent eyes locked on me, and I felt deeply grateful. Seeing this, Nancy and George smiled happily.
Mom, I have a surprise for you.
A surprise.
Yes, can you feel my stomach?
I could slightly feel Nancy's belly twitch. Could it be a second one?
Yes, apparently it was already on the way when we were planning to expose Dad's debts.
That's wonderful. I'm happy to have the chance to be involved in childcare again.
Yes, we're counting on you for a while, Mom.
Sure, leave it to me. I replied happily, with Nancy smiling beside me. George also seemed eager to join the conversation.
Of course, I'll help out too.
His display of defiance was quite unusual, causing Nancy to laugh amusingly. George is serious not just in work, but also in childcare. And so, Nancy was busy preparing for the birth of their second child. Not wanting to be outdone by the young couple, I decided to start yoga. As you age, maintaining physical strength can be challenging. If you're going to be raising grandchildren, you need to ensure you're physically up to the task. Mindful of finances and everyday life, I'm committed to living happily and cooperatively.
Where are you now?
Working in Hawaii.
Kevin quickly responded, but a woman's laughter could be heard from behind the phone call. I could only feel irritation at Kevin, who lied so effortlessly. It was because of Kevin that Timothy ended up in such a state. He had no hair at all, his body completely shaven. It was too pitiful, unbearable to see. I'll definitely make you regret this, I swore while looking at Timothy. I'll make them experience hell.
I was burning with revenge against them. I am Helen Martinez, a 55-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Kevin, who is 4 years older than me. Our only son, Timothy, has already started his career and moved out. Kevin works for a well-known company that appears in TV commercials. Perhaps because of that, he's a bit proud.
I work at such a big company, busting my butt for you guys. You should be crying with gratitude.
That's Kevin's favorite saying. In his view, those who work outside are superior, and those who stay at home are inferior. Because of this, I feel diminished whenever Kevin is around. I worried that Timothy might inherit Kevin's personality, but those fears were unfounded. Timothy grew up well and turned out to be a good kid. He has a bright and honest nature. His honesty makes him easy to deceive, which is his only flaw, but I love my kind-hearted Timothy. Recently, Timothy brought some wonderful news. He's getting married to a young woman named Fiona. They're expecting a child and decided to get married. The dual joy of Timothy's marriage and the baby filled me with happiness. I haven't met Fiona yet, but she's the girl Timothy chose. I want to warmly welcome her as a member of the Martinez family. If Fiona struggles with childcare after birth, I plan to help out without being too intrusive. Just as I was thinking this, Timothy made an unexpected request. He asked to live with us. Are you really saying you want to live at our place for a while? When I asked Timothy in surprise, he nodded seriously.
Yeah. Fiona is feeling anxious about raising the child. It's her first time, so it can't be helped. It would be great if you could help support us, Mom.
Fiona's parents live a plane ride away, so it seems impossible for her to go back to her hometown. That's why the idea came up that they could live with us for a while. However, for Fiona, raising a child in her in-laws' home might be uncomfortable. Is Fiona okay with that? I asked Timothy, feeling anxious. Normally, living with in-laws right after giving birth would make one feel uneasy. Then Timothy laughed and said,
Actually, it was Fiona's idea, so it's fine. Besides, she wants to get along well with you, Mom.
If that's what she wants, then it's okay. If it's Fiona's wish, there's nothing more to say. Plus, I have experience with raising children, so I should be able to support Fiona. But I wasn't sure what Kevin would say. There might be a chance he would oppose it. If so, only I could protect Fiona and the upcoming baby. So, no matter how much Kevin would oppose, I was determined to do my best. But ultimately, when I mentioned it to Kevin, he didn't object.
Why not? I'm all for having a young woman in the house. I'm tired of seeing the same old face.
His words were harsh, but at least he wasn't opposed to the idea. I breathed a sigh of relief, and then a month passed. Timothy brought Fiona home. Of course, Fiona was cradling their newborn baby in her arms.
We'll be staying here for a while, about 3 months, until things settle down, and then we might go back to our apartment.
Timothy spoke to us. I was listening with a smile, but when I looked at Fiona, I was at a loss for words.
Nice to meet you. This is Mary. Doesn't she look just like me? She's super cute, right?
Fiona showed off Mary while speaking to Kevin and me. Mary was quiet, not minding her mother's antics. Nice to meet you. Fiona looked like a woman of the night, wearing a low-cut shirt and a short skirt, her thighs fully visible, and her makeup perfectly done. She did not look like someone who had just been discharged from a maternity ward. But while I was taken aback, Kevin seemed quite pleased.
Well, Timothy sure picked a fine wife.
Kevin was looking at Fiona, grinning and leering. Then he kept ogling her neckline. Though Fiona's makeup was heavy, she looked cute, which must have passed Kevin's visual test. Moreover, Fiona didn't seem bothered at all by Kevin ogling her.
Thank you. Your dad has such a dignified presence. He's really handsome. If I hadn't married Timothy, I might have fallen for him.
Fiona said that as she batted her eyes at Kevin. Kevin seemed quite flattered by her comments. Hey, can you stop that? I couldn't ignore such inappropriate remarks. After all, Fiona is Timothy's wife. Such comments towards Kevin are unacceptable. It was far too impolite. However, as I was about to scold Fiona, Timothy stepped in to mediate.
Come on. Fiona just wants to get along well with my family. Don't be mad, Mom.
If you say so, Timothy. Fiona laughed off the situation.
Did I upset you? I didn't mean to.
She pressed her chest out as she spoke, and Kevin, watching her, laughed and said,
You should welcome such a young and pretty daughter-in-law. It's unseemly for an old lady to be jealous.
What do you mean by that? I was irritated by Kevin's remarks, but Fiona had just given birth. I thought it wasn't right to be too harsh on a woman right after childbirth. I had no choice but to back down. Reluctantly, I decided to keep quiet. Then, as expected, living with Fiona and the others began to create a tense situation. Even though the postpartum confinement period had passed, Fiona made no effort to take care of Mary at all. It became my job to feed her milk every 3 hours. Of course, I was the one sterilizing the nursing bottles too.
My milk isn't coming in well, and my body is still suffering from the birth. Could you do it instead, Mill? After all, you're a housewife with plenty of time, right?
Fiona would say this, dumping everything on me. She wouldn't change diapers or even pay attention when Mary cried. As a result, I ended up taking care of her at night as well. Because of the interrupted sleep, I was suffering from sleep deprivation. Normally, one would be considerate in such a situation. However, Fiona would just lie in bed and give orders.
Mother-in-law, I'm thirsty. Can you bring me a chilled Coke, please? Make sure it's ice cold.
In Fiona's hand was a bag of potato chips. The sheets on the bed were greasy and dirty, presumably where Fiona had wiped her chip-soiled hands. Sighing, I reprimanded Fiona. Fiona, please, enough is enough. Taking care of Mary is also a mother's duty. And since your confinement is over, you should start getting up and moving around. I told her sternly. Fiona's behavior was too much to ignore. Then Fiona's eyes welled up, and she began to cry.
Mother-in-law, that's so mean. Timothy is so busy with work, and I can't rely on him. If Timothy came home earlier, I wouldn't have to ask you.
Fiona sobbed pitifully. Indeed, Timothy had been working late recently due to overtime. He works for a small company and had taken time off for the birth. Surely, the backlog from that time is affecting him now. But that was to consider Fiona during her childbirth. And this was her response to Timothy's efforts at work. What a truly unbelievable daughter-in-law. I looked at her coldly as I said that to myself. Just then,
I'm home.
Kevin came back. Without hesitation, Fiona rushed to embrace him.
Dad, Mom's being awful. She's ordering me to move around when I'm not feeling well. I'm sad.
Then, with teary eyes, she looked up at Kevin.
To say such things to Fiona, that's just low.
Kevin was completely smitten with her. He glared at me as I held Mary.
You should be more considerate of Fiona. She's clearly suffering. Stop being nasty just because you're jealous of her beauty. Let's just ignore this mean old lady and order some food for delivery, just you and me.
What? I exclaimed in disbelief at Kevin's outrageous statement. Why does Kevin indulge Fiona so much? It makes no sense to me. Fiona seemed encouraged by Kevin's words.
Dad, I love you so much.
She said that and hugged Kevin again. Kevin beamed with pleasure. And then Fiona sneakily stuck her tongue out at me when Kevin couldn't see. I was completely taken aback by Fiona's behavior. Thinking about continuing these days made me feel depressed. I don't know if this was the trigger, but after that, Fiona and Kevin's behavior became increasingly unbearable. Days of Fiona acting out and me reprimanding her, only for Kevin to defend her, continued. And still, Fiona neglected Mary's care. She wouldn't even change her diapers. Just when I was utterly exhausted by this situation, Timothy, who came home late from work, spoke to me.
Mom, I'm sorry about Fiona. I wish I could come home from work earlier and help more with Mary.
Timothy looked so sad as he spoke, and it pained my heart. Timothy is not to blame. Even though he always comes home late from work, he takes care of Mary. Sometimes he goes to work on almost no sleep. Timothy felt terribly guilty, though he was not at fault. Then Timothy hesitantly began to speak.
It's also my fault that Fiona is so attached to Dad.
What do you mean? I furrowed my brow and asked Timothy. His face grew even more pained.
Fiona wanted to marry a man with a high income, but I wanted to marry Fiona so badly that I told her. My dad works at a big company. I think Fiona's real target was Dad.
What are you saying? I turned pale at Timothy's revelation. Fiona is still in her 20s, but Kevin is almost in his 60s. Though it was hard to believe, Timothy's expression was serious. Given Fiona's behavior, it was likely the truth. As I struggled to find words to respond, Timothy gave a pained smile.
I'll try to convince Fiona to leave by next weekend. We've been imposing on you for 2 months already. So, Mom, I'm sorry, but can you bear with this a little longer?
All right. I can't imagine Fiona will just smoothly move out next weekend, given her current state. She's been all over Kevin, trying to impress him. But Timothy looked so distressed that I couldn't push the conversation any further. So, I had no choice but to endure it. A few days after that talk with Timothy, I decided to go to the beauty salon for the first time in a long while. After this salon, I planned to go shopping. Fortunately, Timothy had the day off from work and could take care of Mary. Even Fiona, unusually, spoke with a smile.
You've been under a lot of stress all this time. Please take this opportunity to relax.
Perhaps Fiona had a change of heart. Kevin also approached me with a smile.
You're always working so hard. Go buy something nice for yourself.
He handed me a crumpled $10 bill as he said that. I had been neglecting my own needs because of caring for Mary lately. Excited for some alone time, I set out to enjoy my day. Later, I fully enjoyed my time to myself, and in the evening, I returned home after finishing at the beauty salon and shopping. I even bought souvenirs for the welcoming family. For Kevin, I bought some sweets with the $10 bill he gave me. He would surely be pleased. Yeah, I'm home. I cheerfully opened the door, but the house was eerily silent. Oddly, only Timothy's shoes were there. Where is everyone? Kevin, Fiona. As I apprehensively approached the living room, I was met with a shocking sight. Timothy, what happened to your hair? For some reason, Timothy had shaved his head and was sleeping, holding Mary. His eyes looked swollen as if he had been crying, and even his eyebrows were shaved. When I shook Timothy in a semi-panic, he eventually opened his eyes.
Oh, Mom.
When Timothy opened his eyes, they were bloodshot, clearly from crying hard. I turned pale. What happened? Where are Kevin and Fiona? I asked desperately, and Timothy looked like he was about to cry again as he spoke.
Fiona screamed at me. It's your fault I'm suffering like this. Reflect on your actions as a man.
Timothy hung his head in sorrow. Listening further, it seems Fiona had a fit of rage when Mary wouldn't stop crying, and then took it out on Timothy, blaming him harshly. How awful. I regretted going to the beauty salon. I should never have left. I deeply regretted my actions.
Then Dad said, if a man needs to reflect, he should shave his head. He brought out the clippers and forcefully shaved me.
It appears Timothy tried to resist, but it was difficult being outnumbered 2-1. He was held down, powerless to stop them. Frustrated, I inadvertently bit my lip. In the end, Timothy was shaved completely, and the satisfied pair, Fiona and her accomplice, had apparently gone somewhere. Hearing Timothy's story filled me with immense anger. I immediately called Kevin. Fortunately, the call connected right away. "Where are you?" I managed to contain my anger as I asked him. Kevin just laughed carelessly.
On a business trip in Hawaii.
He answered quickly, but I could hear a woman's laughter in the background. I was so irritated with Kevin for lying so casually. It was his fault Timothy ended up like this. Fiona was equally despicable. Timothy was completely bald, with all his body hair shaved off. It was truly too pitiful to behold. I'll definitely make you regret this. After hanging up the phone with Kevin, I looked at Timothy and vowed. Timothy looked very anxious. It's time for Kevin and his ilk to experience hell. How could they do this to Timothy? I was burning with revenge against them. Turning to a pale-faced Timothy, I asked, "What do you want to do, Timothy?" Fiona, a mother, left Mary behind and just took off. Do you still want to be with someone like that? Fiona has failed as a mother and is no longer needed as Timothy's wife. Even if she were to come back, she would likely cause more trouble, possibly even harm Mary. The thought of Mary being put in danger made me shudder. Too much negativity for a baby. After a moment of thought, Timothy finally spoke.
I'm going to divorce Fiona. I've always felt inadequate because my salary was low, but I can't risk putting Mary in danger anymore.
It seems this incident had deeply affected Timothy as well. At this point, there's nothing left to do but fight back thoroughly. I smiled and said to Timothy, "That's right, so I'll divorce Kevin too, and the three of us will leave this house."
Mom.
Tears were streaming from Timothy's eyes. I can only imagine how hard it was for him until I got back. Shortly after, I hugged Timothy and we both cried. Then, 2 weeks later, I received a call from Kevin on my cell phone. He kept calling even though I ignored him. Reluctantly, I decided to answer, but maintained a brusque demeanor. "What do you want?" Kevin sounded panicked.
Hey, what happened to our house? What's going on?
I could hear a woman screaming in the background. It seemed things were unfolding just as I had anticipated. I smirked.
Listen up. I've come back from Hawaii and our house is gone. Where did you take Timothy and Mary?
Fiona screamed into the phone. It turned out that the laughter I had heard during that call with Kevin was indeed Fiona's.
Hey, keep quiet for a second.
Kevin, flustered by Fiona's screaming, started trying to stop her. He probably still thought he could deceive his way out of this. I found their exchange amusing. "Oh really? You said you were away on a business trip. Took your son's wife on vacation. Huh? How could you do that with little Mary still so small?" I then deliberately spoke in an accusing tone to make them feel guilty. Kevin fell silent, having been hit where it hurt, but Fiona responded differently.
What? Jealous old hag. It's more fun for Dad to go on vacation with a young and pretty girl like Fiona than with someone like you.
Fiona confidently lashed out. It seemed she had stopped pretending altogether. She casually called me an old hag. I retorted,
Your shallow actions will cost you everything, not just the house.
The house was gone, but Kevin and Fiona were about to lose much more. Kevin suddenly realized the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, about the house. Why is it a vacant lot now? And there's a for sale sign.
Kevin sounded troubled. I responded, "Well, I leveled it and sold it to a real estate agent." The house was in my name, after all. No problem selling it, right? Suddenly, Fiona began to panic.
What? That big house is that old lady's? Aren't you just a housewife? Why is it in your name if you have no income?
Fiona couldn't believe it and kept hurling insults at me. It seems Kevin hadn't told her the truth.
Hey, why isn't that house yours? Were you being blackmailed or something?
Fiona pressed Kevin for answers, but
Well,
he only gave vague replies. It must be embarrassing for Kevin to admit the truth. He couldn't quite bring himself to say it. I didn't want to prolong this conversation with him any longer, so I decided to just lay out the reality. My family is wealthy, you know. That house was built by my parents as part of my dowry.
What?
Fiona sounded incredulous. My family is well known in the area as an owning clan with ample land and money. Building a house was a trivial matter for them. Hearing this, Fiona turned on Kevin.
What's going on, Dad? You said that woman is under my thumb and she lives off my charity. Were you lying?
Kevin was taken aback by her accusations.
well,
It's pathetic how quickly he changes his demeanor when faced with a little pressure. I had been tolerating his behavior because he was my husband, but I couldn't care less about that now. I sighed and decided to tell them everything. While we're at it, let me tell you, Kevin has no money of his own. He just works at a well-known company. He's actually deep in debt.
Debt? You're kidding.
Fiona was flustered by my revelation. Kevin seemed quite panicked.
Helen, you promised not to say that. You've kept it a secret all this time.
Kevin yelled at me. The truth is, Kevin had debts. When I was busy with Timothy after his birth, Kevin, upset that I wasn't paying attention to him, had an affair. He always wanted to be the center of attention. Kevin showered his mistress with branded bags and jewelry. He was just a junior employee at a big company at the time. He didn't have the means to afford luxury brands. But Kevin, ever the show-off, repeatedly went into debt to please his mistress as she demanded more. By the time I found out, he had amassed hundreds of thousands in debt. When I told Fiona this, she fell silent. She probably never imagined Kevin had debts, considering how well he seemed to be living. And Kevin, seeing Fiona fall silent, desperately tried to placate her.
Money? I can make as much as I want. I'm a division manager at a major company.
However, Fiona seemed unconvinced and wouldn't even discuss it. She must be quite shaken inside. So, I continued to reveal more. That's not all. Kevin frequents the entertainment districts quite a bit and has been playing around a lot. I don't know about those debts though. I wonder how much he has managed to repay. I chuckled confidently as I said that. I could hear Fiona grinding her teeth over the phone, clearly frustrated. Currently, Kevin hardly contributes to the living expenses. He's so overwhelmed by his debts that he came crying to me.
We'll have debt collectors at our house if this continues. That wouldn't be good for Timothy, right? Please, take on all the living expenses.
That's what Kevin said when he pushed the responsibility of paying for living expenses onto me. Normally, a housewife like me couldn't pay for all that. I would have to start working. Fiona finally spoke up, seemingly thinking the same.
Why are you able to pay for living expenses? Even if your family is wealthy, they surely wouldn't support you financially every month, right?
Indeed.
Kevin, pointed out by Fiona, seemed to realize the fact for the first time. He knows so little about his own wife. How can he be so disinterested in me? I said in exasperation. I have rental income from apartments. That's why I receive a steady amount of money every month.
What? What do you mean? I've never heard about this.
Kevin exclaimed loudly in response. Our family has been landowners for generations, owning lots of vacant land around this area. but just holding onto vacant land would incur property taxes, and it would be a waste to let it sit unused. So, my parents decided to build apartments on the vacant lands, and each family member, including me, manages them. Although the construction of the apartments was financed through loans, the rental income exceeds the monthly mortgage repayments. Hearing this, Kevin's voice trembled.
So, you earn more than me. What am I even here for? I could have paid off the debts with that money.
Fiona sounded incredibly frustrated.
I targeted you because I thought you had high income. All this was for nothing. I would have been better off sticking with Timothy. I was sure I could have squeezed some money out of you then.
They continued to probe about my rental income. I told the two, who seemed to think only about money. Can you stop already? It's over for both of you. I'm getting a divorce and will be asking you for alimony.
Alimony.
Hearing about alimony, Kevin recoiled.
Alimony. I have debts and no money. How am I supposed to pay that?
Fiona also pleaded in a shaken voice.
That's right. I don't have an income either.
Didn't you receive branded bags and such? Just sell those. Fiona must have received a lot from Kevin. He even took her to Hawaii. As I spoke in a dismayed voice, Kevin said,
Those bags were gifts from me anyway. Return them. I can use them to pay off some of my debts.
It seems Kevin was really desperate, not caring about appearances anymore. But Fiona retorted without yielding.
No way. I got them, so I'm keeping them. And it's so tacky to ask for them back.
Fiona scoffed at Kevin. Then Kevin seemed irritated and said,
What? As if a woman who only knows how to pile on makeup has a say.
What about you? You're the one with debts.
They began to argue heatedly, and I sighed. Talking with these two any further is just a waste of time. Goodbye then. I gently hung up the phone. After that, Kevin and I went through with the divorce. It ended up involving lawyers, but initially Kevin was quite reluctant.
Isn't there any way other than divorce? I have debts, and my salary is gone after I make the payments. Can't I get some of the rental income?
Kevin pleaded tearfully at the lawyer's office, but I had no sympathy for him. After all, the debts are because of your affairs, right? It's only right that you pay them off yourself. I told Kevin firmly. Kevin lamented how terrible it was, but the lawyer calmly advised him.
Kevin, you don't contribute to the household expenses, and you've racked up debts from affairs. You haven't been involved in housework or raising Timothy either. What exactly have you been doing for your family?
Challenged sternly by the lawyer, Kevin fell silent. He usually acts big around me and Timothy, but he's quiet in front of someone authoritative like a lawyer. I really think Kevin is a small man. Unable to say anything more, Kevin ended up signing the divorce papers as the lawyer suggested. Right after Kevin signed, I handed him a document. Looking at the document, Kevin was shocked.
What is this?
I responded calmly. It's the claim amount for alimony. Kevin slammed the table in anger.
What is this amount? It's too high. People don't usually ask for alimony for an affair like this.
I had demanded $200,000 in alimony. I'm aware it's an exorbitant amount, but it's justified given the circumstances. It includes the household expenses you never paid. Compared to what I've paid, it's actually quite reasonable. Kevin had stopped contributing anything to the household expenses, leaving me to cover all the utility and food costs. And yet, I was also responsible for all the housework and raising our child. Since Timothy and the others returned, I have been tirelessly caring for Mary without sleep. During that period, Kevin was having an affair with Fiona. It's truly despicable. When I pointed this out, Kevin was at a loss for words.
Maybe that's true, but surely this amount is too much. Can't you give a little discount?
I've never heard of a discounted alimony. I was taken aback, but played my final card. Did you forget you shaved Timothy's head? I could file a police report, you know. At that, Kevin's expression immediately turned anxious.
That would be a problem.
Seizing the moment, the lawyer pressed on.
What you've done, even if it's within the family, is inexcusable. If a police report is filed, wouldn't that affect your job?
Kevin works at a well-known company, and if Timothy's situation becomes public, he risks being fired. After some time, Kevin resignedly said,
All right, I'll accept the $200,000 alimony. But we're still family, right? I can still see you and Timothy occasionally, can't I?
What nerve to say that now, after putting Timothy in such danger? He's likely hoping to gain sympathy later on to negotiate the alimony. I firmly told him, Timothy and I will never meet with you again. Once we're divorced, you're just a stranger, and don't expect to see your grandchild either.
What? Don't joke with me.
Kevin hurled insults at me, but I ignored them and left the lawyer's office. The payment method for the alimony would be handled by the lawyer. I never want to deal with Kevin again. Later on, Kevin was fired from his job. Although I hadn't filed a police report, it seems the company found out anyway. Fiona was the cause. After divorcing Timothy and losing custody of Mary, Fiona tried to rely on Kevin, waiting for him in front of his workplace. But with all his debts and alimony payments, Kevin was stretched too thin. He brushed off awaiting Fiona, who, in a fit of rage, loudly revealed everything about him at the scene. Kevin tried to silence her, but it was too late. Other employees heard, and soon the whole company knew. Kevin has been fired from his job, and now only his debts remain. He might be chased by debt collectors and is likely to face a thorny path ahead. The same goes for Fiona. She is being sued for alimony by Timothy. Even selling all her designer bags wouldn't cover the payments. Moreover, I heard she has a substantial tab from visiting host clubs before marrying Timothy. They are still unpaid. It's likely that soon, Fiona too will be in a situation similar to Kevin's. Since then, I have bought an apartment with the money, and Timothy, Mary, and I are living there together. Mary is adorable, just like Timothy. Timothy's hair has grown back and looks natural now. He's completely recovered.
Mom, I'm sorry for always causing you trouble. I have this child now, and I'll get back on my feet.
Mary is growing up healthy. Her first birthday is coming up soon. I'm committed to making her happy, just Timothy and me. That's what I vowed.
Don't splurge with your son's money. Poor old folks, just go home.
During a vacation to celebrate my 60th birthday, Karen hurled these unbelievable words at my husband and me. My anger reached its peak when I heard what she said. Shall we go home then?
Yeah.
She probably didn't think we would actually leave. Leaving a bewildered Karen behind, we decided to go back home, leaving her in a foreign land. We are going to show her hell. My name is Alice Howard. I am a housewife who turned 60 this year. My husband and I, married for 30 years, were invited by our son Tommy to go on a trip to Maldives.
Mom and Dad, I never got to do anything parent-honoring for you. This is just a small token of my gratitude. Let's go together. No holding back.
I have 6 children, and Tommy, as the eldest son, has been supporting us. I worked part-time until our 4th child was born, spending my days overrun with childcare and housework, with just a few minutes to myself each day. Of course, there was never any time alone. and I can't even remember having a fun coffee time with friends since the kids came along. During this time, our son Tommy, since starting elementary school, took the initiative to help me and also took care of his siblings. With my husband busy as a company employee, Tommy's support was invaluable to me. I felt an immense gratitude towards him. As the hectic days went by, Tommy grew up, got married, and left the house, followed by the other children moving out for marriage or to the big city. It was just my husband and me left at home. While reminiscing about those noisy days, enjoying coffee with my now retired husband, Tommy came home for a visit after a long time. He had something important to discuss, which turned out to be this delightful invitation, and my husband and I were overjoyed. However, this conversation would lead us to an unbelievable situation.
Why did you even invite your in-laws to the trip?
These were the words of Tommy's wife, Karen. As Tommy, who brought his wife home, enjoyed a family dinner for the first time in a while, Karen called him out to the hallway during the discussion about the upcoming Maldives trip. Worried, I peeked to see what was happening and saw Karen confronting Tommy. Karen, with a terrifyingly harsh tone, was getting up in Tommy's face, giving him the evil eye.
It makes sense, doesn't it? The trip is also a celebration of the folks' 60th birthdays. Why wouldn't we invite them?
Why should we have to pay for them? If you're inviting them, they should at least pay their own way. Your mother does nothing but lays around at home. It's outrageous to think we should cover for such a slothful person.
Karen was a nurse, and Tommy was in the position of a doctor. They had no children, and she despised me for being a stay-at-home mom raising kids.
Excuses like no time to work don't fly with me. Time is made. People who can't manage their time just say that to escape. I absolutely refuse to spend my money for such a lazy person. I won't allow it.
Her yelling seemed to be aimed at making sure I could hear it inside the room, making my heart ache. I knew I wasn't exactly favored before, but I never imagined I was this disliked. And to think they believed I was a stay-at-home mom because I was lazy, which brought tears to my eyes, is just unbelievable. Yet, Tommy didn't hesitate to defend me against Karen's words.
You haven't raised 6 kids, so what gives you the right to act all high and mighty? Talk about it after you've walked in the same shoes. I respect my mom and am thankful to both of my parents. I'm taking them on this trip no matter what, got it?
To think my son had grown up to value his parents so much. I was deeply moved and cried silently, careful not to reveal my presence to Karen and Tommy. After that day, Karen became more hostile towards me when Tommy wasn't around. She would criticize the taste of my cooking, and during visits home would say things like it smells musty, trying to belittle me with her words. It must have been too much for her to accept that Tommy defended me. Initially, I was downhearted and wondered why I had to endure this, but Tommy's words from that day helped me hold on. However, that changed when Tommy called me, saying he needed to talk.
Sorry for this, Dennis. I'm thinking of divorcing Karen.
My husband and I were shocked at the straightforward declaration. When we asked what happened, Tommy showed us 2 photos. In them, a woman who looked like Karen was arm in arm with an unfamiliar man. What's this?
While I was at a medical conference, a colleague sent this to me. Karen meeting up with some guy.
So, Karen is having an affair.
It was a shocking revelation. I might be biased, but I can't see any reason why someone would cheat on Tommy. Financially and looks-wise, there was nothing to complain about from a third-party perspective. Even relatives begged to have their daughter marry Tommy, as he was such an accomplished son. It's unbelievable that Tommy would be cheated on. I doubted my own ears hearing such an incredible story.
After we get married, I found out Karen had always been quite the player. She held back for a while to marry me, but it seems like she went back to her old ways when my business trips increased. At home and even at work, her lack of motivation has become too obvious recently. Honestly, I don't have the confidence to continue with her.
Hearing this, while he gripped the hem of his trousers with a pained expression, made my heart tighten. From a parent's perspective, he was always contributive at home. He grew into a kind son who understands people's pain, which to me is an invaluable treasure. Who could stand seeing such a son hurt like this?
That's why I'm thinking of getting a divorce, but this alone isn't enough to confront her with it. So, I need your help.
With that, Tommy made a certain proposal to us. Though shocked by what he suggested, if it would help Tommy, both my husband and I agreed to his plan. We decided to pull one over on Karen, so we came up with a plan. Time passed, and on the day of the trip, my husband George and I drove to Tommy's house to pick up Karen.
Thanks for picking me up, George.
She came out of the house wearing a wide brim hat and a white dress, clearly trying to play the part of a scheming woman. In fact, Karen had been making moves on my husband for a while now. Probably because his birth family was wealthy. Her eagerness for money was blatantly obvious. Whenever Tommy wasn't around, she would sidle up next to my husband, even once lying about getting carsick just to take my seat in the front of the car. Later, when I asked Tommy about it, it turned out to be a complete lie. She never had motion sickness. At that time, there was no reason to doubt her, so we just took her at her word, but now it's different. I'm certain that everything I had suspicions about was a lie, and both my husband and I are on high alert. However, showing our hand would ruin the plan. Today is our supposed celebration trip, but it's really to carry out our plan. We can't let her suspect a thing. My husband and I made sure to act as usual.
Tommy said he'll come later, so he asked us to go ahead to the destination. He's busy with work, it seems.
Landing at the airport and going through the procedures, Karen muttered her words with a bored expression. She probably wanted to flaunt having my husband and Tommy to herself, making me jealous. Whenever it was just the four of us, Karen acted in ways that seemed designed to stoke my jealousy. Looking back, I can see so many of these behaviors now. Why didn't I notice them before? Well, I did notice, but I think I just suppressed it. Thinking about all the hardships Tommy went through, I feared my feelings would interfere with his happiness, so I kept silent. but I don't need to hold back anymore. Standing confidently next to my husband, Karen wrapped her arm around his with a sullen expression.
I've never been on an overseas trip with my father, so I'm thrilled to be traveling with my father-in-law, George. You're making up for the memories I couldn't have with my father.
With a cackling laugh that seemed almost cartoonish, she flaunted a smug smile at me, then clung to my husband's arm, pushing her chest against him. My husband looked more annoyed than pleased by her actions, but Karen seemed oblivious to his discomfort. She was eagerly watching to see how I would react. But I maintained a firm demeanor, silently pleading with my husband to endure it as we finished the boarding process. We boarded the plane with a tense atmosphere. And soon, in a far-off foreign land, she would face her comeuppance. After a long journey, we arrived at Vienna International Airport, greeted by cheerful flight attendants. Tommy was supposed to guide us, but he was absent due to work. As we wondered what to do next, Karen sweetly sidled up to my husband.
Can't we hire a guide now, George? I only got a little spending money from Tommy, and I don't have much on me.
Despite having a decent income herself, Karen seemed fully expecting to be treated by us. I guess there's also the matter of making sure my husband brought extra cash. His sigh of disbelief revealed his clear view of her sordid intentions.
Karen, I hate to say this, but we're here because Tommy invited us. You know, trying to make us pay seems a bit off, doesn't it?
I felt a jolt inside. He sounded like a grumpy old man laying on a guilt trip. It was hard to predict how Karen would react to such blunt words. The initial plan was to act upon reaching the hotel, but my husband unexpectedly took the initiative, causing me a bit of panic.
What are you saying? Do you want me, who didn't bring much money, to hire a guide?
We're questioning the expectation that you're entitled to our hospitality. Alice and I are here at Tommy's invitation. We heard he's taking care of the expenses, so we didn't bring much cash either. Assuming we'll just cover for you doesn't seem right.
Upon hearing we didn't have cash on hand, Karen clicked her tongue and distanced herself from my husband, raking through her hair with a lazy gesture. Both my husband and I were stunned by her blatant demeanor, which seemed to suggest that interacting with us was a waste of effort.
If you don't have money, just say so clearly. Really, useless old folks.
Karen's voice was loud enough to be clearly heard. At that moment, when she revealed her true colors, my husband and I exchanged glances and proceeded with our plan. Hey, Karen, that's no way to talk.
We're just stating the plain truth.
A lecture from both of you. I don't need that. Acting like it's natural for me to treat you, but you're relying on Tommy's money for this trip, too. Thinking you wouldn't have to spend a penny because you're being celebrated, right? You're no different, so I don't want your high and mighty lectures.
Looks like she's done pretending to be nice to us. She suddenly changed her attitude, stood arrogantly, looked down on my husband and me, and said something condescending in a mocking tone.
Don't live it up on your son's dime. Poor old folks, just go home.
At her words, my anger peaked. Shall we go home then?
Yeah.
Without taking the bait, I calmly spoke to my husband, but then Karen, flustered, interjected.
Talking big when you don't even have a return ticket. What's the point? That's hilarious.
Actually, she had only been given the one-way ticket by Tommy. She was explicitly told to be prone to losing things and is unreliable by Tommy, so she reluctantly settled for a one-way ticket, only to find out she couldn't return to the US without him. She ended up in a situation. But we are supposed to be unaware of her situation. If we were to find out about this pathetic situation, it would undermine her dignity. That's probably why all she could muster were these tough words. However, we already knew the story from Tommy. And we had already received something from him. No return ticket. What made you say that? I then pulled out the return plane tickets, including my husband's. Karen was dumbfounded. Speechless, her mouth agape. We do have our return tickets, you know.
Why do you guys have tickets?
Why, it's normal to hold on to your own ticket, right? Or what? Don't tell me you didn't get a return ticket from Tommy. I couldn't help but sneer at her, showing that Tommy trusted us more than her, a sweet revenge for all the taunts. Even for someone like me, a stay-at-home mom she looked down upon, to mock her over such a trivial matter must be unbearable for her pride. While feeling somewhat petty, considering everything up to now, this was nothing. If anything, it was not enough. Watching her turn red with rage, I felt a sense of satisfaction.
No way. Just go home already. Just seeing your faces irritates me.
Her retort, almost like sour grapes, secretly had me holding back laughter. The sight of Karen retreating in frustration was incredibly satisfying. She had mocked others enough. Let her fully taste the misfortune. With that in mind, my husband and I decided to wander around the airport area until our flight back. After leaving Karen behind and returning to the US swiftly, we met up with Tommy at a cafe near the airport, as planned. Seeing us back, Tommy greeted us with a wry smile.
Welcome back, both of you. That quick return flight must have been tiring.
My body's all stiff, even in first class. It's stuff on the old bones.
Sorry, Tommy, for making such a quick return, especially in those nice seats.
I should be thanking you. Sorry for pushing you so hard, okay?
Stop it. I'm still young at heart.
But I was worried, you suddenly starting a fight with Karen at the airport, doing something unplanned. I didn't know what to do.
I just couldn't take it anymore. I had such a strong dislike for that flirty act of hers.
As my husband apologized with a rueful laugh, Tommy's phone started ringing. From Karen.
Yeah. It's been ringing off the hook since hotel check-in time. I bet she panicked when she found out her hotel reservation get canceled without her knowing. She's such a princess who can't do anything on her own.
Tommy scoffed at his continuously buzzing phone in silent mode. It was my first time seeing this dark side of him, and I made a mental note never to anger him.
Thanks to you guys, I gained a lot here and think I can finally divorce her. Really, thank you. Sorry for involving you in such a mess during your milestone celebration.
Don't be silly. In a way, this is a celebration for me too, knowing you won't have to put up with that anymore. during the few hours until Karen returned to the country. We enjoyed some rare quality time, just the family. Then the moment of truth arrived.
Tommy, what on earth is this all about? Explain yourself.
After receiving an email from Karen saying she was on the plane, we headed to the airport. As soon as she stepped off the plane and saw me, she let out a roar that could echo throughout the airport. Realizing this was too conspicuous, we quickly got her into the car and drove to their house. Once home, Karen noticed something was amiss.
What is this? What's going on here?
She realized the house looked unusually bare.
Let's explain things in order. Shall we go to the living room first?
Ignoring the bewildered Karen, we proceeded inside. While thanking Tommy for the coffee, we quickly moved to the main topic.
Karen, we need to talk.
Before that, explain. What were you thinking, doing such a thing? Because of you. It's been one disaster after another. I couldn't get into the hotel, and I had to communicate with gestures because I couldn't ask people anything. Do you know how many times I was given the wrong directions? I walked so much I thought I was mountain climbing, and I'm exhausted. My legs are sore from the muscle pain. And then the return flight was in the cheap economy seats. Economy. I never thought I'd have to pawn my luxury watch.
As her shrill voice became too much to bear, my husband and I exchanged incredulous looks. Apparently, she had pawned her watch to get some money. Amid this, Tommy watched her intently, and after she finished her tirade, he quietly spoke.
Is that all you wanted to say?
What did you say?
Karen's eyebrows twitched in surprise, probably expecting an apology from Tommy, but his unexpected response took her aback. It must have been the first time she saw Tommy. You had always been kind and indulgent, looking at her so defiantly. She glared at him, trying to intimidate, but Tommy met her gaze unflinchingly.
So, you have no idea why you're in this situation?
Tommy's probing words seemed to finally make her question. Karen started speaking with a cold look and a haughty attitude, crossing her legs.
Of course, who leaves their wife stranded abroad? What did I do?
She's sticking to her story. Nobody knows about her affair. She seemed to think so. Tommy sighed in exasperation, then showed her 4 photos. I didn't miss how her face went pale instantly.
Let's see if you recognize this.
Presented with undeniable photographic evidence of her affair, Karen faltered. There were 2 photos added there, showing Karen and the man she cheated with after their affair, and when my husband and I saw them, we looked at her with contempt. We looked at her as if she were something vile, putting distance between us.
You've been wasting my money for a while, and I noticed. But I also knew it's true that I made you feel lonely. I'm a workaholic, often choosing my job over family, so I said nothing. But I never imagined you were financing this man.
Tommy had hired a detective to discreetly investigate Karen until this trip. It was revealed that her lover was a gigolo, and she was his top-paying client, giving him the biggest tips. Their relationship had developed into a romantic affair, clearly crossing the line between a client and a service provider. Tommy found out that when he was away on business trips, he had been staying in their house for several nights.
You said you had a terrible time in Maldives. Then what about this? You deceived me, laughed behind my back, and even complained about me to your lover, calling me nothing but money, useless. I've confirmed it myself by meeting with him directly. I even have the audio of that conversation.
You met him.
Of course. I figured your side of the story would be full of lies. I got everything out of him first.
He then showed her what appeared to be a voice recorder, and Karen seemed to resign herself to the situation. She started to profusely apologize to Tommy.
I'm sorry, my dear. Please forgive me. It was just a moment of madness.
A moment of madness. I inadvertently reacted to her words. So, a moment of madness makes it okay for you to hurt Tommy like that. Tommy had always shielded me from her, caring for me. I knew how hard he had worked to balance his job and household duties for the sake of his family. Her words, betraying him so casually, made something inside me snap. How could you think an apology would suffice after all the pain you caused Tommy? My eyes welled with tears, more from anger than sadness. My husband comforted me, wrapping an arm around my shoulder and gently hugging me. Watching us, Tommy then presented her with divorce papers.
I've heard about everything you did to Mom and Dad. I have no intention of continuing with you. This house will be sold. Pack your things and leave immediately. No matter if you deny the divorce, I am determined to proceed with mediation to separate from you. What you've done is now coming back to haunt you. Just accept it.
And so, our family cut ties with her. Even afterward, Karen kept pleading with Tommy, but he had run out of patience and coldly rebuffed her, finding her cries annoying, and decided to move back to our home until the divorce was finalized. The emptiness of their house was due to Tommy having movers transfer his belongings back to our place. Seeing everything being efficiently handled, I was impressed by how sharp he always was. As Tommy predicted, the divorce proceedings went to mediation. Karen, who had repeatedly denied wanting a divorce, couldn't escape it after photos of her affair and the lover's testimony came to light. She was even ordered to pay alimony, and the divorce was finalized. She came to our house several times, wanting to meet Tommy, but I turned her away at the gate. While apologizing for her disrespect towards me, she begged to speak to Tommy. However, I was furious. Stop taking us for granted. I will never forget what you've done, no matter what. Don't ever show your face to our family again. With that, I called the police, and after that, she never appeared before us again. Finally, we regained our peaceful days. Thanks to Tommy's arrangement, we were able to redo our 60th birthday celebration. The whole family gathered, along with our children and grandchildren, for a grand celebration.
Mom, Dad, live a long and healthy life.
While thanking Tommy saying this with a bright smile, I watched over the happiness and growth of the children.
I'm moving back home to give birth, so get out of the house, you nuisance.
Michelle chuckled and exchanged a glance with Ashley as she delivered her declaration. If I were to be kicked out right now, my daughter would have nowhere to go either. It was appalling that Michelle, who was also expecting a child, could be so dismissive of my few-month-old baby's well-being. Ashley and Michelle shared such similar personalities that both of them kept grinning slyly, their eyes fixed intently on me without looking away. They were undoubtedly waiting to see me flustered. Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I responded cheerfully, and the smiles vanished from Ashley and Michelle's faces. I'd never let them see me upset or begging. In fact, I'm grateful to them. Thank you for giving me the courage to move forward. And so, I made a big decision. Then, something unexpected happened. I'm Emily Carter, a company employee in my early 30s.
Don't worry about a thing. Just marry into the Carter family. We don't have any of that daughter-in-law versus mother-in-law drama here.
That's what my future mother-in-law, Ashley, said with a laugh when we first met to discuss the wedding. My first impression of her was that she was an energetic woman. On the other hand, my father-in-law, George, didn't say much, and at first, I was worried he might be in a bad mood. But then he offered me a second cup of tea and served some delicious milk tea he had made. The cake we all ate together was apparently something George had bought himself.
George does everything for me. Honestly, I've got it so easy now.
Their personalities are polar opposites, but maybe that's why they get along so well. My husband Ryan seems to have taken after George completely. He rarely talks about himself and is always the listener. Though calling him a listener might be a stretch. He's not exactly attentive. He often zones out and acts a bit clueless.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening.
That's practically his catchphrase. I imagined that after we got married, Ryan and I would have a relationship similar to Ashley and George's. After our wedding, Ryan and I moved into an apartment together. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. Just as we were enjoying that blissful time, disaster struck. We had just returned home from shopping for baby supplies when we saw a commotion near our apartment building. The entire building had burned to the ground. Apparently, the fire started in a neighboring unit. Naturally, Ashley and George welcomed us warmly after we lost both our belongings and our home.
Good thing you were out. Otherwise, you'd have ended up like a roast pig.
Ashley laughed, pointing at my growing belly. For a moment, I was taken aback by her comment, but I was shaken from the fire and not thinking clearly. So I told myself she was just trying to cheer me up.
I always said you two should just live with us from the start, didn't I? But you wanted to enjoy newlywed life, so you rented that apartment. Who'd have thought it would turn out like this? What a cosmic punishment. Anyway, I'm thrilled to have you guys back home with us.
After losing everything in the fire, the people around me offered kind and sympathetic words. But I felt guilty for making them go out of their way, so Ashley's ability to laugh it off truly saved me. With cheerful Ashley and kind George, I'm sure we can make this living arrangement work. And that's how I stepped into my own personal hell.
That's awful. Emily, you really have no taste, do you?
Ever since we started living together, Ashley's constant criticism has been wearing me down. No matter what meal I prepare, her harsh and unrelenting remarks follow.
Emily, all your cooking tastes bland. Are you being stingy with the seasoning, or was your family so poor growing up that they couldn't afford to use spices?
Even though it's just words, they cut through me like a sharp knife, leaving me in pain. I'm planning to take maternity leave soon, but I've experienced my fair share of criticism as a working adult. Even during my school days, I dealt with tough feedback. But Ashley's comments are sharper than anything I've ever encountered, and they're steadily eroding my confidence.
Tonight's dinner was made by Emily, who spent way too much time on it. I had her redo it 6 times, but it's still kind of meh. Still, she worked really hard. So, George and Ryan, you'd better appreciate it and eat up.
That said, Ashley isn't only harsh. In front of George and Ryan, she often lifts me up.
Hey, Ryan, what's the first thing you should say after you eat?
What? Oh, thanks for cooking?
Ashley looked exasperated at Ryan's absent-mindedness.
Honestly, Ryan, you're hopeless. Even if it's not true, you should say it's delicious.
What? Well, it's delicious.
Prompted by Ashley, Ryan turned to me with a smile.
This chicken is really good. It tastes like the one my mom used to make.
At that moment, Ashley burst out laughing.
Wait a second. That chicken is store-bought. It was only $1. Emily's still a new homemaker, so it's kind of cruel to say a $1 chicken beats her cooking. Seriously, Ryan.
Ashley laughed so hard that I forced myself to smile too. Ryan gave a small chuckle as well. He's kind but oblivious. Now that I think about it, during the time we lived together in the apartment, I don't think Ryan ever once said my cooking was good. Maybe Ashley's involvement is actually helping me.
I think Emily's cooking is great. You made this, right, Emily?
George muttered softly.
What?
The light-hearted atmosphere between the three of us instantly froze.
What's that supposed to mean? Are you saying my cooking is bad? Do you even realize who you're talking to? Who do you think makes sure you get a hot meal every day?
Ashley's furious voice, louder than I had ever heard, echoed through the room. George didn't apologize or defend himself. He just stayed silent. It's been a month since we suddenly started living together. And now, I'm certain that Ashley isn't a good person. To put it nicely, she's bright, energetic, and outspoken, but in reality, she's just rude and lacks tact. What's more, she's the queen of this house. Whatever Ashley says goes, and there's a clear atmosphere where no one dares to talk back.
What? Why are you bothering with such tedious prep work? Just chop the food quickly and stir-fry it all at once. It'll taste the same. Seriously, Emily, you're so useless. Housewives don't have all the time in the world, you know. You should hurry up with cooking, then move on to cleaning and laundry. Have you ever heard of the word efficiency? Or do you not even know what that means? Honestly, your mom really should have done a better job raising you. Now I have to deal with the consequences. Unbelievable.
Ashley says all this in such a cheerful tone that it almost seems like she means no harm. But it doesn't stop there. Her complaints extend beyond my cooking and cleaning. She criticizes my clothes, the time I wake up, even my makeup.
You've got such a plain face today. Aren't you considering plastic surgery?
Ashley sneers at me as part of her morning greeting.
You always wear black, Emily. It's like you're ready to go to a funeral anytime. Is your mom doing okay?
And if I wear brown instead, she'll laugh until her stomach hurts and say, "You look like a tree in a school play." No matter what I do, Ashley either mocks me or looks down on me. I kept telling myself she's just a straightforward person and tried to improve where I could. But for every improvement, she'd find something new to nitpick. There was no end to it. In just 1 month, I realized Ashley wasn't a good person. Yet, I haven't complained to Ryan or suggested moving out because, deep down, a part of me still hopes that Ashley will change.
Hey Ryan, why don't you take Emily out on a date before she has the baby? Look at her face. Even on her day off, she's gone all out with makeup. Those lashes look like bird feathers. She's putting in the effort, so don't just lounge around. Take her out already.
Ashley scolded Ryan, who had been lying around watching TV all day because it was Sunday. Thanks to her, Ryan and I ended up enjoying a rare date together. Moments like these make it hard for me to truly dislike Ashley. She does show some consideration in front of George and Ryan. She's not such a bad person that she'd completely humiliate me in public. Despite being unsettled by Ashley's rude comments, I successfully gave birth and became a mother.
Look, doesn't this baby look just like Emily?
Wow, she really does. Genetics are wild. This is hilarious.
Ashley, not exactly wearing the expression of a doting grandmother, held the baby to her chest. That day, Ashley brought along Ryan's sister, Michelle, to the hospital.
You're planning to go back to work in a year, right? Poor kid's gonna be left alone. But don't worry, I'll keep helping you out, so leave it to me.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate it. I knew I'd be relying on Ashley's help a lot during childcare. I appreciated her offer. Feeling unusually emotional since giving birth, I even teared up at how dependable she seemed. But Ashley and Michelle exchanged a look, their lips twitching before they burst out laughing.
Make sure you work hard for this kid.
If she wants plastic surgery in the future, it's gonna cost a fortune.
As if they'd planned it, the two of them laughed uncontrollably. Plastic surgery for a newborn? What are they even talking about? Am I just overly sensitive because I just gave birth? No, it's not me. It's Ashley and Michelle. Ashley, with an exaggeratedly sweet smile, poked the baby's cheek with her finger.
Poor thing. It would have been better if they at least looked like Ryan.
But if she turns out like Ryan personality-wise, that's even worse. He's so slow.
Honestly, Ryan and Emily are both equally slow. So no matter how this kid turns out, it's a lose-lose situation. What a shame for my first grandchild.
I couldn't comprehend their conversation. As I sat there in stunned silence, Ashley suddenly grabbed my hand.
Don't worry. Don't look so serious. Let's raise this baby to be a great kid like Michelle. With me here, everything's gonna be fine.
For some reason, she was trying to comfort me. I felt confusion and anger bubbling up, but I couldn't find the words to express it.
Don't neglect your parenting just because your kid isn't cute. Do your best, okay?
With those parting words, Ashley and Michelle left without staying long. It felt as though I'd been caught in a whirlwind, and even after they were gone, my mind remained in chaos. I sat there, unable to move for a while. Soon after, I returned to Ashley's house, and life with my newborn daughter began. Having a baby completely changed my daily life.
Taking care of a newborn is so easy since all they do is sleep.
Ashley acted unfazed, even though she didn't lift a finger to help. But by the time my daughter was about 3 months old, Ashley's behavior started to change.
This is so loud. Crying this much. There must be something wrong with this baby.
Ashley jabbed at her temple with her finger and grimaced. While my daughter's cries were loud, she wasn't unusually fussy. With Ryan and George away at work on weekdays, staying in the same space as Ashley felt suffocating. During the day, I quickly finished my chores and took my daughter out as much as possible. Part of it was to avoid giving Ashley any reason to complain. Even so, Ashley found a way to complain about that too.
Hey, Ryan, listen to this. Ever since the baby was born, Emily's been dumping all the housework on me and going out all the time. Today, I even had to wash the dishes and mop the floor. Must be nice to just play with the baby all day. Oh, but I guess playing with her counts as parenting too, right? Well, I suppose I can't complain about all the extra burden I'm carrying. Oh my God, my back hurts.
Really? Then how about going for a massage?
Ryan, kind but oblivious, completely missed the point. Whether he noticed Ashley's malice or not, he avoided addressing the real issue. Opening his wallet, he handed Ashley $100 for the massage. Watching this unfold, I felt a pang of frustration, but then George quietly tapped my shoulder. In his hand was $100 that he subtly offered to me. "What's this?" I asked, but he said nothing, slipping the bill into my hand before Ashley could notice. Actually, George has given me cakes and chocolates before. It seems he's careful not to let Ashley find out. While it feels like he's trying to be considerate, I really can't tell what's going through his mind. As for Ashley's claims of being burdened with chores, in reality, it's things like putting her used dishes in water or lightly wiping up spilled milk with a towel, only to make the mess worse. No one would call that housework. I was beginning to feel uncomfortable around Ryan's family. Ashley and Michelle were too domineering, while George and Ryan were overly timid, constantly tiptoeing around them. It was all too extreme. I just want to leave this house already. But thinking about moving out with my infant daughter so soon after giving birth felt like an impossible task. As much as I disliked the situation, my days were consumed by taking care of my daughter and doing the household chores. I'd even gotten used to brushing off Ashley's snide remarks. If I apologized quickly, her comments would be shorter and less harsh. Then, one day, Michelle showed up at the house unannounced with exciting news.
I'm pregnant.
She said this with a wide grin, rubbing her still flat stomach. Michelle had married before Ryan and me, but we'd had few chances to meet. She lived in a nearby town, so it seemed Ashley often visited her there.
If it's Michelle's baby, it'll definitely be a handsome boy or a beautiful girl. I'm so excited.
Only Ashley was overjoyed. Ryan, George, and I just stared blankly at Ashley and Michelle as they celebrated. Of course, I haven't forgotten Michelle's rude comments during my daughter's birth. Even though I want to keep my distance from her assertive personality, she keeps coming closer to me.
You're still as ugly as ever.
She deliberately leaned in to peek at my daughter in my arms and whispered in my ear. I felt the hairs on my body stand on end in an instant, but when I looked at Michelle, she tilted her head with a smug smile. It was as if she was pretending she hadn't said anything. If she's going to make snide remarks, I wish she'd say them louder so I could confront her openly. It's so frustrating.
My child is going to be the heir of the Carter family. We can't have an ugly kid like yours bringing shame to the family name.
Michelle's foul breath tickled my ear as she chuckled. Then she exchanged a glance with Ashley, nodded, and declared,
I'm having my baby at home, so you need to get out of this house. I can't stand living with outsiders, so make it quick. Starting today, I'm living here, so I want you gone immediately.
Michelle's sudden raised voice made Ryan and George's eyes widen. Her demand was outrageous. If I were to be kicked out right now, my daughter would have nowhere to go either. It was appalling that Michelle, who was also expecting a child, could be so dismissive of my few-month-old baby's well-being.
Now, Michelle, that's a bit harsh, don't you think? Poor Emily. But I'm sorry, Emily. This is how it has to be. Could you look for an apartment and move out soon? Living with other people can be stressful, you know? We don't want Michelle to have unnecessary stress during such an important time. You understand, right, Emily? You just had a baby yourself, so you know how a pregnant woman feels.
There was no way Ashley would reprimand Michelle for her rudeness. Ashley was just like her. Both of them grinned slyly, never taking their eyes off me. They were undoubtedly waiting to see me flustered. Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I responded cheerfully, and the smiles vanished from Ashley and Michelle's faces. I'd never let them see me upset or begging. In fact, I'm grateful to them. Thank you for giving me the courage to move forward.
What? You're leaving?
Yes, that's right. I'll leave right now. Ashley double-checked with me, but I responded smoothly. Ashley and Michelle, along with George and Ryan, all looked dumbfounded. While it's understandable for George and Ryan to be shocked, I couldn't help but laugh at Ashley and Michelle's surprise. They're the ones who picked this fight. Without hesitation, I packed some essentials into a large backpack and prepared to leave the house. With my daughter, who had just learned to hold her head steady, secured in a baby carrier and the big backpack on my shoulders, I was ready to go.
So, where are you planning to go in such a hurry? Even if it's to your parents' house, it'll take you half a day to get there, right?
That's true. It'll take more than half a day, but I think I'll head back to my parents' house for now. As Ashley pointed out, my parents' house is far away. Even though I wasn't planning on a complete move right away, I just wanted to leave for a while. However, my parents' house wasn't close enough to be an easy option. Until recently, I had given up on the idea of traveling with my young daughter because it seemed too difficult. But now that she can hold her head up steadily, she should be able to handle long-distance travel soon.
Your parents' house. Isn't it out in the middle of nowhere? I've never even heard of that town, and your parents have such thick accents. Your baby's going to end up smelling like the countryside. I'm not sure I'll even want to dote on her when you come back.
Even though my daughter and I were being kicked out, Ryan still remained silent. He probably couldn't process what was happening. With no one to stop her, Ashley continued her barrage of snide remarks right up to the end. Don't worry. I'll admit my parents have a bit of an accent, but they're not from the middle of nowhere. Their town is actually more developed than this one. In fact, my daughter might come back smelling more like the city. Ashley hadn't expected me to talk back and bit her lip. But unfortunately, even if she does pick up a city scent, you won't get to enjoy it. I won't be coming back to this house.
What?
I'll be staying in my hometown permanently. Can making a decision really make someone this strong? I was the most surprised by my own transformation. If I'd apologized and obeyed Ashley as usual, maybe things would have stayed peaceful. But I finally realized I couldn't let my daughter grow up in a life where all she knew was compromise and resignation.
Well, I did say to leave this house, but I didn't mean for you to go all the way back to your parents' place. Both you and Ryan work around here, so it's normal to rent an apartment nearby, isn't it? Once my baby is born, things will get hectic, so make sure you stay close.
Michelle was still spouting nonsense. It seemed she hadn't understood my resolve. How horrifying. Were you planning to use me as a servant? I have no intention of dedicating my life to you or Ashley. I'll quit my job if I have to and get as far away as possible. Thankfully, my hometown is more developed, so finding work won't be an issue.
What? After all the help my mom has given you, isn't that a bit selfish? You let us help you, but now you're abandoning me? That's awful.
I reflected for a moment. Did I ever receive any help from Ashley? I've done all the housework since moving in, and she's never even changed my daughter's diaper. The only thing I can thank her for is providing a place to sleep after the apartment fire. I said this with a smile. Naturally, Ashley and Michelle were furious. Ryan's eyes darted around nervously, while George covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. What an unsettling, twisted family.
I was so kind to you, and this is how you repay me? Unbelievable.
Kindness? Are you talking about your constant barrage of snide remarks? I took them as insults, but were they supposed to be helpful advice? Ashley, who always kept her composure with a smile, carried an air of being forgiven for the occasional slip of the tongue. In front of Ryan, you'd make those subtle jabs that insulted me while sounding like compliments. But when it was just the two of us, you'd hurt me with much harsher words. Why did your behavior change depending on who was around?
What are you even talking about? Stop being so paranoid. Sure, I've got a sharp tongue because of my personality, but I never meant anything by it.
The excuse that Ashley has no ill intentions and is simply straightforward doesn't hold up. If you truly had no bad intentions, then why not say the same things in front of others? Like openly calling me a useless, or saying, "Why don't you get plastic surgery every morning instead of a good morning?" Or, "The baby's ugly like me and must be crazy." The small gestures of kindness backfired. By occasionally pretending to be a good mother-in-law, she ended up digging her own grave. If you truly had no malice, your attitude wouldn't change depending on the situation. It's because you had bad intentions that you avoided making blatant snide remarks in public, isn't it? Ashley ground her teeth furiously. So, Ashley, were you ever kind to me? I asked, but all she did was huff and puff without responding. Since it's clear I wasn't cared for or treated kindly, I can leave for my parents' house without any regrets. The nuisance is leaving, so Michelle can relax at home as much as she wants. That was definitely a sarcastic jab. Ashley, clearly furious at being outsniped by someone who had been so compliant until now, couldn't hide her frustration.
Hey Mom, this totally backfired. You're the one who told me to come home because Emily would take care of everything.
It seemed Michelle had been planning to rely on me all along, and now she wasn't hiding her dissatisfaction.
This is all your fault, Mom. Honestly, do you even realize how awful your personality is? You act so superior and are ridiculously condescending. You're always bad-mouthing people. It's seriously unpleasant.
A crack formed between Michelle and Ashley. The bond of the seemingly close-knit mother-daughter duo shattered in no time.
What? Who do you think you're talking to? Don't you dare speak to your parent like that.
Parent? Who? You've never done anything parent-like.
The two glared at each other, sparks flying, as Michelle smirked provocatively.
Dad's the one who did the cleaning and laundry, and most of the meals were takeout. So what exactly were you doing, Mom? Gossiping at relatives' houses because you had nothing else to do? Chatting and bad-mouthing people at the neighborhood corner? I mean, what else was there for you to do? You acted all high and mighty, treating Dad like a servant. But honestly, you weren't even a stay-at-home mom. You were just a lazy bum. Isn't that pathetic?
Michelle shrugged her shoulders. She truly is Ashley's daughter. Their level of sarcasm is on a completely different scale from mine. Although I have nothing to do with this and would like to leave quickly, their argument has started right in front of the living room door, blocking my way out.
I'm pregnant, so I don't want to eat store-bought deli food every day like before. Mom, can you even cook anything healthy? Wait, you can't. You've never cooked before. All you can do is transfer store-bought food onto plates to make it look homemade. What's the point of coming back home if Mom's the only one here? It's useless.
Now that you mention it, I don't think I've ever seen Ashley cook.
Exactly.
I muttered without thinking, and Michelle eagerly agreed with me like we were friends. It was shocking that Ashley, who harshly criticized my cooking, had raised her kids on deli food. Apparently, Ashley had been trying to keep that fact a secret, as her face turned red and her lips trembled. I leaned back to create some distance from Michelle, but it seemed to Ashley as though Michelle and I were teaming up against her. Feeling abandoned by Michelle, Ashley turned to Ryan for support.
Why? I raised Michelle and Ryan so well, didn't I? And I'm the most important person in this house. I raised both of you. Why do I have to listen to such awful things? Ryan, you're on my side, right?
Suddenly pulled into the conversation, Ryan jumped in surprise. Sweat began dripping from his forehead as he stumbled over his words.
On your side? Well, I guess I'm kind of on Emily's side, But Mom, you've always hated Michelle, haven't you? You used to tell me things like Michelle's dumb or Michelle's so rude. So even if Michelle hates you, it's fine, right?
It was probably his awkward attempt at encouragement. Ryan seemed to be trying to cheer Ashley up, but it backfired spectacularly. Michelle's face darkened.
What? She called me dumb. Then what about how she always said, Ryan is so slow and useless at everything. You're the only one I'm proud of.
Michelle scoffed dismissively.
Oh, I see. She bad-mouthed me to Ryan and bad-mouthed Ryan to me. What kind of parent does that? That's just the worst.
It seemed Ashley couldn't go a day without snide remarks or insults. Every time she opens her mouth, the words spill out naturally. It's as instinctive as breathing.
That's not true.
Ashley's raspy denial sounded weak, and she looked smaller than usual. Why was I ever afraid of Ashley? I couldn't understand it anymore.
Well, Emily, I'm sorry. Can I come with you? I just want to be with you.
While Ashley was being berated by Michelle, Ryan timidly turned to me.
I've always known Mom had a sharp tongue, but I guess I thought it was normal, or I just stopped caring, or no, I pretended not to hear it, because if I really listened, it would have broken me. But ignoring it when you were hurting, pretending not to hear or see it, that was wrong of me. I'm so sorry.
Ryan looked straight at me, his eyes filled with tears as he apologized. It turned out that his usual absent-mindedness and seeming lack of awareness were his way of protecting himself. I could understand that because, for a time, I had also resigned myself to Ashley's words, thinking it was pointless to fight back. I fell for Ryan because he was kind and gentle. Even though he probably resented Ashley, he wasn't blaming her. For the first time, I genuinely felt like giving him one more chance. I nodded slightly. Ryan's face softened in relief, and the tears that had been welling up in his eyes spilled over in a rush.
Are you leaving too, Ryan?
As Ryan and I held hands, George asked this question. It was hard to hear him over the noise of Ashley and Michelle's argument. When Ryan nodded, George nodded back and seemed to smile faintly. He took a deep breath and spoke with a strong, clear voice.
Well then, I think I'll go back to my hometown too.
Ashley and Michelle's noisy fight came to an abrupt halt. It was the first time I had ever heard George speak so loudly. As we all stared in surprise, George gave us a refreshed and confident smile.
Ashley, I can't live like this anymore. Ryan and Michelle are grown adults now. They don't need both parents under the same roof anymore. After 35 years of marriage, I think it's about time I went home.
What? Go back. What are you even talking about? Have you lost your mind?
Ashley's disgust at George's announcement was so strong it made her tremble.
You're part of the Carter family. Got it? You should remember that you married into our family, and now you're talking about going home like some selfish, shameful woman? You don't even have a home to go back to.
Hearing this, I realized Ashley's superiority complex came from the fact that George had married into her family. In most marriages, neither spouse should hold more power, but Ashley clearly didn't see it that way.
I won't allow you to abandon the Carter family. Do you know how much we paid for you when we got married? You were bought, so don't act like you're entitled to anything.
Normally, people in this country wouldn't pay dowries. Ryan and I certainly didn't. The way Ashley talked was as if it were some form of human trade, which sent chills down my spine.
That was $30,000, right? My parents set it aside untouched, so I can return it to you anytime.
What?
Apparently, Ashley was the only daughter of the Carter family, and George had been brought in as a son-in-law to inherit the family's estate and maintain the family grave. It wasn't as though George married into the Carter family out of financial need. That said, the Carter family had an abundance of wealth at the time. Raised as a privileged daughter, Ashley might have felt as though she had bought George with money. Over time, an overwhelming hierarchy had formed between them. Naturally kind-hearted, George had endured Ashley's domineering behavior for 35 long years.
Michelle is moving back. Emily is returning to her hometown with Ryan, so I thought I'd join the trend and do the same.
Don't be ridiculous. You're a man. I won't allow you to go back to your hometown or get a divorce. That's embarrassing.
Despite having belittled George for years, Ashley was clearly panicking. Was it simply frustration, or was there something else? George's smile grew deeper, carrying a hint of something meaningful.
It's a problem, isn't it? The Carter family's glory is a thing of the past. After your parents passed, you inherited everything, and you've completely squandered it. All that land. Now all that's left is this house, right?
How do you know?
I never received a single penny of the Carter family's wealth because I was just an outsider, but I was tasked with handling all the tedious legal paperwork.
How foolish Ashley was. She glanced around nervously, looking to Michelle, only to be glared at, then reached toward Ryan, who avoided her. Unable to approach George either, she was left completely isolated.
The great Carter family has already fallen apart. Getting divorced won't bring any more shame. Your relatives are already disappointed in you. In fact, some have even told me they're grateful I haven't abandoned you yet. You, Ashley, are the disgrace here.
After 35 years of keeping his feelings bottled up, George finally exploded. No one could stop him.
Once I cut ties with the Carter family, I won't be giving you any money. Go ahead and live as you please with your darling Michelle, who's conveniently moved back. I have no idea how you two will survive without any money, but good luck.
With that, George raised his hand and headed for the front door. Before anyone could stop him, he was gone. Ryan and I exchanged a glance, held hands, and started walking toward the door ourselves.
Wait, where are you going?
Ashley's faint voice tried to call us back. I turned to face her and answered nonchalantly. Weren't you and Michelle the ones who told me to leave? I'll be going back to my hometown, as you requested.
Wait, Ryan, what about you?
It was obvious what Ashley was implying. Having been abandoned by George, she now wanted to rely on Ryan. Her clinging, desperate gaze was pitiful, but I couldn't feel any sympathy. It was just annoyance. Seeing Ryan's sad expression, I tugged his arm firmly. Ryan's coming with me. Besides, you still have Michelle here, so you won't be lonely. At my words, Michelle's face twisted in visible hatred.
You know what? I'm skipping the whole moving back home to give birth thing. There's no point if it's just me and a useless mom who can't even do housework. And now there's no money either? No thanks.
Even Michelle seemed to have abandoned Ashley. Now Ashley was truly alone. It was finally time for her to face the consequences of looking down on others all her life. Fearing that Ashley might beg us to stay now that Michelle wasn't moving back, I hurried toward the front door with Ryan. Surprisingly, Ashley's angry voice echoed behind us.
Michelle.
Michelle, who had been about to leave with us, stopped in her tracks. She sighed deeply, her face full of contempt and cold indifference. As if just looking at Ashley made her feel sick, she lightly covered her mouth with her hand.
You don't have anywhere to go, Michelle.
Michelle's previously sharp and confident demeanor faltered. Her eyes widened, and her body trembled as if she had remembered something important. Seeing Michelle's panic, Ashley let out a disgusting laugh.
You got caught cheating and got kicked out by your husband. And when you told your lover you were pregnant, he dumped you too.
So that's why she suddenly announced she was moving back home, even though she's barely showing. Ashley, pointing at her own daughter and cackling like a demon, was utterly horrifying. Michelle covered her ears and looked up at the ceiling as if pleading for an escape. Sensing that another dramatic scene was about to unfold, I firmly grabbed Ryan and finally walked away, leaving them behind for good. In the end, Michelle stayed with Ashley. It turned out that Ashley was right. Michelle had nowhere else to go after being kicked out for cheating.
Pathetic woman, abandoned at your age.
Don't act high and mighty when you've got no money and no man.
Apparently, the two of them now live together, constantly hurling insults at each other. Their shouting can be heard from outside, making them the laughingstock of the neighborhood. Neither of them seems to realize that their insults only reflect their own pathetic situations. It's questionable whether their constant fighting indicated a close bond, but at least Ashley and Michelle managed to live together for a while. Unfortunately, their peace didn't last long. After George and Ashley's divorce was finalized, Ashley ran out of money and was forced to vacate the house.
The land is in your name, but the house itself is mine. I'm tearing it down, so get out. If you don't like it, buy the house from me.
When George decided to take things seriously, he showed no mercy. Reluctantly, Ashley began selling off pieces of her land to scrape together enough money to buy the house. But since the property was in a rural area, it didn't fetch much. Despite the lack of value, Ashley was tempted by the lump sum she was offered and sold the land, ignoring the long-term consequences. By the time Michelle found out what had happened, it was too late. Ashley had enjoyed a brief month of indulgence with her newfound money, only to see it disappear entirely. In the end, she lost the land, her money, and eventually the house, leaving her with absolutely nothing. It was a fitting outcome for someone who had squandered her entire inheritance.
How pathetic.
That was all George said about the situation, laughing as he refused to help her. George truly did return to his hometown, where he focused on caring for his elderly parents and making up for lost time in a way he never could before.
Can't you at least send Ryan back to me? He's my child, you know? Help me out. I'm in trouble here.
At some point, Ashley called my parents' house. She recounted her story of losing everything, clearly trying to evoke sympathy. I listened until the end, but there wasn't a single thing I could feel sorry for. Ryan, who had regained his composure after some time away from Ashley, was so appalled by how much she had brought it upon herself that his face twisted in disbelief.
I'm too slow and useless to help you. And I don't want to bother Emily's parents, so please don't call again.
He firmly rejected her, hung up the phone without waiting for a response, and ended the conversation. For the first time, I felt a sense of reliability in Ryan, who had always been timid and unsure of himself. As for Michelle, it seemed she had also divorced and put her child into foster care before starting work in nightlife. Honestly, the child was likely better off in a foster home than being raised by Michelle. Though nightlife work is often thought of as lucrative, Michelle's naturally condescending attitude got her fired repeatedly. She not only struggled with living expenses, but was also paying alimony for her affair during her marriage. Eventually, she fell into debt, and soon enough, the classic cycle of borrowing money to pay off other debts trapped her completely. I heard through the grapevine that Ashley and Michelle are now living together, fighting constantly but relying on each other to get by. They managed to rent a rundown apartment, but their loud, frequent arguments have annoyed the neighbors so much that they're on the verge of being evicted. That day, after storming out of the house, Ryan and I spent half a day traveling to my parents' home. Exhausted, we were warmly welcomed by my parents, and Ryan began to cry softly. He was clearly moved by their kindness. Strict yet loving parents. They can be frustrating when they meddle, but sometimes you just want to lean on them. And when you do, they embrace you with unconditional love. I had always thought that's what parents were supposed to be. But I've come to realize that there are all kinds of parents in this world. Ryan chose to let go of his family and job to live with me and our daughter. He quickly found a job in a new town, rented an apartment, and started a new life for the three of us.
Thank you for giving me this chance. I'm so happy right now.
As we gazed at our peacefully sleeping daughter, Ryan and I smiled warmly, filled with love for her.